My mother-in-law told everyone I trapped her son at 9 weeks pregnant. Months later, she sobbed, "I was wrong," after one photo album proved the truth. From the start, his mother Madeline had different ideas about our relationship. She thought Ethan could do better. She thought I wasn't attractive, accomplished, or good enough for her ideal kid. At family dinners she smiled but criticized everything I said and did. My job wasn't paying enough, she said. She said my apartment was too small. She said my family was less established than theirs. Though she never said anything offensive, her message was clear. She wanted her son to realize I was beneath him. Ethan protected me when he saw his mother's behavior. She had to accept his claim that I was his lifelong love. She apologized and vowed to improve. When we met again, she continued her subtle jabs. I ignored it because I loved Ethan and getting married required dealing with his mother. I expected things to improve after the wedding. Went worse. 3 years into our marriage, I got pregnant. Ethan was thrilled. He cried when I gave him the positive test results and started preparing the nursery. He told everyone he was having a child. I fell in love with him again because he seemed so happy. Madeline reacted differently. She didn't smile when we told her at a family meal. She did not applaud us. She stared at me coldly and asked my progress. I said 9 weeks. Counting backwards on her fingers, she seemed to be trying to catch me. She said it was convenient timing. She meant what? Asked Ethan. She said nothing and changed the subject. Remarks began after dinner. Madeline informed family that I had taken her child. She claimed I got pregnant to force him into marriage before he could back out. She said women like me used babies as insurance. She said Ethan was too innocent to understand what I was doing and needed to be awakened. Ethan's cousin told me at a baby shower. She thought I understood Madeline. She thought Ethan told his mother. Because he wasn't sure. His mother only spread her lies to those she thought would not tell us. I told Ethan everything that night. He was furious. He asked his mother for an explanation. She denied slander. She thought his cousin misunderstood. She said she would never accuse me of such a crime. She grieved his unfair assault, and Ethan apologized. Spring brought our daughter. She appeared identical to Ethan. Ancestors gave him his nose, chin, and odd eye color. Both Ethan and she have the same left shoulder birthmark. The nurses said she looked like her father. The doctors joked that I did all the work and she was his twin. Everyone who saw her agreed. Everyone but Madeline. She held our baby for 2 minutes before giving her back at the hospital. She said the baby was small. He looked nothing like Ethan as a newborn, she said. Babies may resemble one parent at first, but this changes as they grow. She sowed mistrust in a room of people who saw the connection. Over the months, Madeline's campaign intensified. She informed extended family that she wasn't sure the baby was Ethan's. I cheatingly passed off another man's child as her son, she said. She advised Ethan to get a paternity test before getting involved. She told her aunts, uncles, and cousins while beaming at me at Sunday dinners. Ethan learned from several relatives this time. Madeline couldn't dispute the many reports of the same feelings. When he challenged her again, she said she was worried. She said a mother can protect her son. She maintained that the baby did not resemble him despite everyone else's claims. She said she would feel better with a test to prove everything. She advised me to prove her wrong if I had nothing to hide. Ethan looked at his mother before looking at our daughter in my arms. Daughter shares his face. Our daughter was his child, visible to all. He told his mother that she didn't trust him if she needed a test. He told her that seeking proof while the evidence was sleeping in front of her showed her unwillingness to be wrong. Being right was more important to her than knowing her granddaughter. He told her to apologize to me and stop lying or she wouldn't be welcome in our home. Madeline said he picked me over his mother. Ethan would rather have his wife and kids than someone who rejected them. She ran out, expecting him to call and return it in a few days. No call. Months, then nearly a year. Since Ethan stopped talking to his mother, our lives have settled into a comfortable routine that feels lighter than since I got pregnant. Lillian started doing small things that made my heart bulge. She clutched her toes and gurgled, which was close to laughter. Hearing Ethan's voice after work, she kicked her legs. We spent evenings on the floor watching her explore her hands like they were the most beautiful things. No one doubted she was his daughter. Nobody lied about me. Nobody forced me to prove myself every time I entered a room. One Saturday morning my mother arrived with bags of food and that determined face she has when caring for someone. She made breakfast while I fed Lillian and sent me to the shower while she cleaned up. When I returned, she had Lillian on a blanket doing tummy time with grandmotherly encouragement. I sat next to them and watched. My mother looked across at me and softened, as if to ask me a question I didn't want to answer. She asked how I was in general. Not the superficial response I gave others, but reality. Something about her soft, knowing voice broke me. I started crying on the living room floor. Crying isn't pretty. The kind that makes your face red, nose run, and breathing difficult. She let me cry on her shoulder while Lillian kicked blissfully on her blanket, unaware that her mother was falling apart 4 feet away. I told her I was tired of being the villain in unwritten stories. I did nothing wrong except fall in love with someone whose mother hated me. I somehow became evil. Before we stopped going to family gatherings, people stared at me strangely. People kept whispering, thinking I couldn't hear. So many people disliked me because of Madeline's lies. Even after Ethan stopped talking to her, I felt it daily. My mother hugged me harder and said Madeline's lies revealed her character, but not mine. Any reasonable person could recognize Lillian as Ethan's daughter, she said. She said people who accepted claims over proof were not worth her tears. She said I was a good mother and wife, and Madeline's jealousy and control issues were hers. Wanting to hear that made me cry more. Ethan's phone rang that afternoon after my mother left. Grant called, and Ethan's voice was tense as he replied. He listened intently, his jaw clenching. I had not seen him so angry in months when he hung up. Grant called to say Madeline was visiting extended family. She didn't apologize or take responsibility for her comments about me. She portrayed herself as a victim, telling everyone she was hurt. She claimed we were denying her only grandson for no reason. She sobbed in front of relatives and uncles over her son choosing his wife over his mother. She omitted everything she did to raise this scenario. Ethan charged across the living room, fists clenched. He said his mother still didn't get it. She still thought she was wrong. She blamed me for trapping him with a baby for months. I was accused of cheating for months. Despite our daughter's face, months of paternity testing requests. He finally built a barrier, so she begged for mercy. I felt my chest change when he paced. We spent the entire time reacting to Madeline's next move. Maybe it was time to act. I said we had to control the story before his mother ruined it. Ethan paused and looked at me. I suggested detailing what happened. The truth about his mother's words and actions. Nodding followed a moment of thought. He joined the family group chat on his phone. Thumbs quickly moved across the screen for 25 minutes. His writing was clear and precise when he showed me. He clarified why we set limits with his mother. Described her charges about my capturing him. He described the lies she spread about my loyalty. He described her desire for paternity testing despite proof. He showed that her actions and refusal to repent caused this alienation. His message was sent before we could doubt it. Within minutes, answers arrived. While some family members believed Madeline was lying, others supported her. Others wrote notes urging us to forgive family members regardless of their actions. Some claimed they had no idea things were so bad. Mason responded, and Ethan blushed as he read it. His brother called us theatrical. Madeline was only worried, he said. He said women can protect their boys. Ethan wrote fast, pressing the screen harder than necessary. He said their mother accused his wife of cheating and entrapment, not compassion. He said the accusations were severe and damaged my reputation all around. He said Mason's downplaying showed why they needed family separation. Ethan ended the argument by throwing his phone on the couch. Amazing things happened 4 weeks later. Lillian started sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night. One morning, I felt refreshed for the first time since she was born. I regained clarity. I functioned normally. My return felt gradual. I took her to her 7-month checkup on Thursday morning. Her pediatrician weighed, measured, and performed all normal exams. Lillian was aware, watching movement and responding to sounds she noticed. Lillian was healthy and growing normally, she said. The exam room gave me a rush of pride. My daughter Madeline thrived despite stress, deceit, and family dysfunction. My actions were correct. I was packing the diaper bag and leaving the waiting area when someone called my name. I saw one of Ethan's distant cousins standing there. She carried a baby carrier and seemed to want to be elsewhere. She praised my child but couldn't look at me. Her eyes kept moving to the side, floor, and receptionist desk. I saw what was happening quickly. She wasn't sure what to believe after hearing Madeline's story. She stood too far away, kept the conversation surface level, and didn't look at me when she asked how old Lillian was. In the waiting room, I snapped. I'd hidden enough. I was tired of being humiliated by others' lies. I opened the photo album on my phone. I handed her the phone with Lillian's current photos. When the cousin looked at the screen, she looked completely different. She widened her eyes and opened her lips. She glanced from the portrait to Lillian in my arms, then back. She claimed she didn't realize the baby resembled Ethan. She apologized for being odd and said she had heard false things. She asked for more photos, so I showed her a dozen more that showed Ethan's different qualities with her father. The cousin left, ashamed and reflective. I told Ethan about meeting his cousin after Lillian went to bed. I said I was tired of Madeline's lies affecting my reputation months later. I tired of seeing people's uncertainty. I was sick of fighting false charges. Ethan suggested posting more Lillian photos on social media and in the family group chat. Let the visual evidence speak, he advised. People would know Madeline was lying if they saw how much she resembled him. We spent the next hour selecting photos from our collection. We chose photos that highlighted Lillian's features, eye color, and Ethan resemblance. We created a shared album and sent it to our extended family with a brief statement about sharing our daughter's first 7 months. The response was rapid and impressive. Family commented within minutes. The same traits were noted. She supposedly had Ethan's nose, chin, eyes, and emotions. They compared Ethan's infant photos, and the similarities were striking. Others wrote private notes apologizing for their doubts, saying they should have known better than to trust the allegations. The album spread beyond our circle. Their cousins gave it to their parents. Uncles received it from aunts. Ethan's extended family had seen the photos within a day. Next afternoon, Vanessa texted me. She said the images were widely circulated, and that many people wondered why they had accepted Madeline's charges. My stomach turned when she said something. She said Madeline saw the images and was upset, but she couldn't explain why. I slept poorly that night. I kept thinking about Vanessa's text. Images made Madeline emotional. Was wondering what it meant. Was she crying because she realized her error? Was she regretting losing her granddaughter? The difference counted. One expressed regret. Only the other expressed regret for the results. 3 days later, Ethan's phone rang at dinner. His body stiffened as he watched TV. He replied, and I heard Richard's voice clear enough to understand some phrases even though Ethan wasn't speaking. Richard claimed Madeline had been crying nonstop since seeing Lillian's current photos. He said she wanted to talk. He said they could arrive in 25 minutes if we let them. Ethan stared at me across the table. Shake my head. He denied his father. Before his mother took responsibility, he said they weren't welcome in our home. Richard argued. Ethan stopped him, saying that spreading lies about me to the family could not be resolved in one conversation. He said his mother had months to apologize but escalated her charges. Richard reported Madeline's pain. Ethan said I suffered when his mother accused me of cheating and trapping him with another's baby. The call ended poorly. Ethan watched his plate. She made a happy noise with her bouncer, and he didn't look up. The following days were hard. Ethan came home exhausted from work. He held Lillian for long periods without speaking. I could feel his stress rising. His shoulders stiffened. His jaw clenched. He barely ate dinner. He returned home 3 hours late Thursday. After feeding Lillian, I put her to bed. He entered and stood in the hallway. I asked what happened. He reported a major work initiative failed. Despite not causing the failure, his employer blamed him. He said he spent the afternoon in meetings being criticized for others' mistakes. He leaned on me like he was too sleepy to stand when I hugged him. His lap held Lillian's baby blanket as we sat on the couch. He held it without looking. Made him tea. It was forgotten, so he drank it cold 90 minutes later. Ethan finally spoke in bed that night. He said he was thinking about his mother more. He wondered if our full no-contact policy was too harsh. My stomach sank. I worried because I wasn't ready to have Madeline back. I also didn't want to sadden Ethan. I asked his meaning. He suggested letting his parents visit if his mother apologized. He said the arrangement affected him more than expected. Despite his displeasure, he missed his mother. I sat up in bed. I reminded him that his mother told everyone I caged him for months. I reminded him she thought I cheated and Lillian wasn't his. I told him she suggested a paternity test because our daughter's face wasn't enough. He claimed to know. He denied justifying her actions. He said he was pondering the issue. Argument ensued. Our first big fight over his mother since he estranged her. Ethan suggested supervised visits if she apologized. I explained that her feelings about images did not erase months of calling me a liar. I told her crying because she missed her grandchild was different from apologizing for my image. I understood, he said. We might listen to her. I got up. I reminded him that his mother hadn't done anything to deserve forgiveness. My statement that she was upset about the consequences didn't mean she understood the pain she caused. He agreed with me, but he was sick of choosing between his wife and mother. I was tired of being the villain for defending myself and our child from malicious lies. We alternated. We kept quiet because Lillian was asleep in the next room. Our hostility was palpable. That night I slept on the couch. Ethan came out and sat with me in the morning. His apology. He denied pressuring me. He said he was missing and angry at his mother. He said work stress made everything harder. I said I understood. I expressed concern that he was suffering. I said I didn't want to ruin his mother-son relationship. My hand was taken. He said Madeline must be accountable for reconciliation. Not just regret, but genuine understanding of what she did wrong. He said I decided when and if she met Lillian. He prioritized my safety and comfort over his mother's. We held hands as morning light streamed through the windows. Chest tightness eased. Claire took me to coffee later that week. Ethan and Lillian stayed home. I needed to go out. I needed to talk to someone unattached to Madeline. I told her everything in the corner booth. Telling her about Richard's call. I asked her about Ethan and if we were too harsh. I told her about our disagreement and felt guilty for setting limits. Claire listened uninterrupted. After I finished, she leaned forward. She recalled Madeline accusing me of entrapment and infidelity to anyone who would listen. She recalled Madeline's attempt to get Ethan to get a paternity test for a baby he clearly owned. Protecting myself and my daughter from that toxicity was not cruel, she said. She claimed Madeline caused the problem alone. She said I owed no forgiveness to someone who had spent months destroying my reputation and marriage. I felt tears coming. She gave me napkins. She said being the bigger person didn't mean letting toxic people bully me. She said boundaries protect, not punish. I felt more grounded at home. Ethan and I sat down after Lillian slept. We discussed his mother's accountability more casually. We decided it meant a face-to-face apology to me, not through family members or crying phone calls, in which she acknowledged the harm she caused. We agreed it required gradual behavior change. Not just one conversation where she apologized and expected normalcy. We agreed she should correct her lies. Tell those who heard her accusations she was wrong. We documented everything. No confusion exists regarding expectations. Ethan promised to inform his parents. He said the arrangement would continue if his mother refused to meet. Weekend arrived. Near our apartment I took Lillian to the park. She enjoyed being outside. She jumped and squealed when she saw birds and trees. I took photos of her laughing in her stroller. Her smile was huge. Her eyes sparkled. The best photo was posted on social media with a simple caption about enjoying spring. Many of Ethan's high school friends commented within 90 minutes. They requested a filter. They wondered if genetics were powerful. They claimed she was Ethan's copy. The post circulated. I saw it in family group chat. I knew Madeline would notice. I stopped caring. Evening. My phone rang. I picked up an unknown number for some reason. Madeline's voice was heard. She was crying so hard I couldn't understand her. She insisted she was wrong. She insisted on seeing her granddaughter. Words fell out in pieces between gasps and tears. In my kitchen, I held the phone away from my ear. I was mad. Hearing her cry like this made me feel an unexpected sense of sympathy. She begged me to listen. She stated that she had been looking at photos of Lillian all week. She admitted that she was ashamed of herself. She could not eat. She kept seeing her granddaughter's face and realizing she had passed up the opportunity to be a part of her life. I took a breath. I told Madeline that I couldn't have this conversation with her right now. I told her that if she wanted to apologize, she should do so properly. Not over a crying phone call that felt manipulative. She begged me to not hang up. She apologized. She repeated it over and over. She claimed she had been wrong about everything. I told her that apologizing was not enough. I claimed she spent months calling me a liar and implying I cheated on her son. I said she tried to convince people that Lillian wasn't Ethan's baby despite the fact that anyone with eyes could see the resemblance. I told her she needed to take real responsibility for that. Not just cry because she was sad about missing out. She kept begging. Her voice became higher and more desperate. I hung up. My hands shook. I put the phone down on the counter and stood there trying to process what had happened. Ethan came through the door 25 minutes later and found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. He dropped his bag and walked straight to me. He inquired as to what had gone wrong. I told him his mother had called. His expression changed instantly. He became protective and angry in a way that made his jaw tighten and his voice quiet. I described the sobbing phone call and how Madeline begged me not to hang up. I told him about her repeatedly saying she was wrong without accepting responsibility for the specific actions she took. Ethan took out his phone right there. He called his father. Richard answered the second ring. Ethan told him that Madeline should respect our boundaries and stop making dramatic gestures that put pressure on me. He explained that calling me directly to cry was inappropriate, and that all communication should go through him. Richard's voice came through loud enough for me to hear some of it. He was defending Madeline. He said she was truly sorry and that we were being cruel by separating her from her only grandchild while she was clearly suffering. He stated that Madeline was devastated after seeing the photos and realizing what she had lost. Ethan lost his temper. He told his father that Madeline's suffering was the result of her own actions. He claimed she spent months calling me a liar and implying I cheated on him. He claimed she tried to persuade people that Lillian was not his baby. He claimed that calling his wife to sob over missing out was neither an apology nor an admission of guilt. Richard attempted to interrupt, but Ethan continued. He said that if his mother wanted to return to our lives, she needed to accept full responsibility for her actions. Not cry because she was sad. Do not make me feel guilty for protecting myself and our daughter. Richard claimed we were being unreasonable. Ethan ended the call. The following few days were tense in our apartment. Ethan was concerned about a project at work that was going poorly. He was concerned about his family situation. I felt guilty, despite knowing I shouldn't. I kept thinking about how I was a barrier between Ethan and his mom. I knew logically that Madeline was solely responsible for the situation. But watching Ethan struggle made me feel responsible. Lillian picked up on our anxiety somehow. Babies can tell when their parents are upset. She got fussier than usual. She cried some more. She did not want to take a nap. She wanted to be held constantly. Having a fussy baby, dealing with family drama, and feeling guilty about it all made things more difficult. Ethan and I were both exhausted. We were short with each other in ways we usually aren't. Minor issues escalated into heated debates. I snapped at him for leaving dishes in the sink. He became annoyed when my crying woke him up at night. We apologized to each other, but the tension remained. My phone rang on Thursday morning as I was feeding Lillian. Once again, the number is unknown. I almost didn't answer, but Vanessa's voice came through when I picked up the phone. She stated that she wanted to discuss the situation with me as a woman-to-woman conversation. I paused. Vanessa had been respectful of our boundaries. She had never pressed us before. She'd been nice when she came, but I wasn't sure if this was another attempt to make me feel bad for keeping Madeline away from Lillian. Vanessa appeared to sense my hesitation. She promised not to guilt-trip me or persuade me to do anything I wasn't comfortable with. I agreed to meet her the next day at a coffee shop close to our apartment. When I walked into the coffee shop on Friday afternoon, Vanessa was already sitting at a corner table. She had ordered me a latte. We chatted briefly about Lillian and the weather. Then Vanessa revealed the real reason she wanted to meet. She confirmed that Madeline's breakdown after seeing the photos was genuine. She claimed Madeline had been telling family members she was mistaken about me. She stated that Madeline was ashamed of what she had said and had no idea how to fix it. I listened without interrupting. Vanessa appeared sincere, but I wasn't ready to believe that Madeline's feelings made everything okay. I told Vanessa that if someone sincerely apologized, it wasn't that difficult. I said Madeline knew how to contact us. She understood what she needed to do. Saying sorry to other family members did not undo what she did to me. Vanessa nodded as if she understood. She admitted that Madeline struggles to admit her mistakes. She stated that pride has always been Madeline's biggest flaw. She stated that Madeline wishes to apologize but is unsure how to do so in a way that feels appropriate for her actions. I could feel my patience running out. I told Vanessa that it was not my responsibility to manage Madeline's pride. I said I wasn't going to make it easy for her after she spent months making my life miserable with her accusations. I reminded Vanessa that Madeline told people I trapped her son with a baby, that she accused me of cheating, and that she questioned whether Lillian was truly Ethan's daughter despite the obvious resemblance. I said those were not minor errors or misunderstandings. These were deliberate lies intended to harm my reputation and marriage. Vanessa gazed down at her coffee. She said she could understand why I was angry. She confirmed that she would be there as well. I went home after coffee and told Ethan about our conversation. He listened as Lillian bounced on his knee. When I was finished, he said his mother needed to do the hard work of a genuine apology without intermediaries. He claimed that sending Vanessa to assess the situation did not constitute acceptance of responsibility. We talked for a while about what we really wanted from Madeline. We agreed that if she wanted to return to our lives, she should write me a letter. This is not a text message. This is not a telephone call. A genuine letter taking full responsibility for her actions and their consequences. She had to acknowledge the specific things she said. She needed to explain why she had said them. She needed to apologize for the harm she had caused without making excuses. Ethan stated that he would communicate this requirement to his parents. He stated that if his mother did not agree to meet it, the arrangement would continue. Ethan texted his father that evening. He made it clear that the first step was to issue a written apology, acknowledging specific harm. This is not a guarantee of immediate reconciliation. It is simply the first step. Richard responded approximately 90 minutes later. He claimed they believed we were being unreasonable. He argued that demanding a written apology was excessive and formal. He claimed Madeline had already admitted she was wrong, and we were punishing her by making her jump through hoops. Ethan read the message aloud to me. Then he typed back, saying that if a genuine apology was too much to ask, they could keep the arrangement. He stated that we were not interested in half measures or fake reconciliation. Richard did not respond after that. 3 weeks passed without a letter. I began to suspect that Madeline's breakdown was motivated by her own feelings of missing out, rather than genuine regret for what she had done to me. She was saddened that she didn't know her granddaughter, but she wasn't sorry for calling me a liar and destroying my reputation. Ethan appeared relieved and disappointed. I could tell he was hoping that his mother would step up. He wanted to believe that she was capable of true accountability. But as the days passed and he heard nothing from her, he began to accept that perhaps she wasn't. We stopped discussing it so much. Life returned to normal routines. Lillian learned to roll over from back to stomach. We celebrated that achievement without thinking about Madeline at all. A letter arrived in the mail on Tuesday afternoon. I immediately recognized the return address. My hand shook when I opened the envelope. The paper inside was nice stationery with Madeline's name printed on the top. Her handwriting filled 4 entire pages. I sat down on the couch and began reading. The letter detailed each accusation she leveled against me. She wrote about telling family members that I had trapped Ethan with a pregnancy. She accused me of cheating and passing off another man's child as her son. She wrote about recommending a paternity test after everyone noticed the resemblance to Ethan. She admitted she was wrong about everything. She admitted that she tried to turn her family against me because she didn't believe I was good enough for her son. She wrote that she felt threatened by how much Ethan loved me and how complete our little family appeared without her involvement or approval. The letter contained an apology for questioning Lillian's paternity when the resemblance was obvious to everyone. She stated that she was seeking reasons to be correct rather than accepting the truth. She admitted that she wanted me to be wrong about everything because it would prove her initial assessment of me correct. She wrote that seeing recent photos reminded her that she had missed months of her granddaughter's life due to her own pride and cruelty. She claimed she was ashamed of herself. She said she understood if I never forgave her, but she wanted me to know she was mistaken about me from the start. The words weighed heavily on the paper in my hands. I reread the letter 4 times. Some of it felt real. Parts of it felt like something someone would write if they knew exactly what to say. Words are simple. What is most important is changed behavior. I carried the letter into the kitchen, where Ethan was serving Lillian mashed sweet potatoes. He looked up as I walked in, and I handed him the pages without saying anything. He wiped his hands with a dish towel and began reading. I watched his expression change as he read through each paragraph. His eyes became wet. His jaw stiffened. After he finished, he carefully placed the letter on the counter and stared at it for a long time. He said it was the most accountable his mother had ever been about anything. He claimed she had never admitted being wrong so completely before. He suggested that perhaps she was capable of change. I told him I wanted to believe it. But we needed to be careful. He consented immediately. He said we couldn't simply let her back into our lives because she wrote a good apology. We needed to see if she meant it with her actions over time. We sat at the kitchen table after Lillian went down for her nap and discussed what would happen next. The letter was a good starting point, but we weren't ready for in-person contact yet. We needed to know whether Madeline would actually do the work of rebuilding trust, or if this was just another ruse. Ethan called his mother that evening. I sat next to him on the couch to hear both sides of the conversation. He told her we had received the letter and appreciated the apology. He said it would take time to rebuild trust and that she would need to change her behavior with family members. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Madeline expressed her understanding. She stated that she would do whatever it took. She admitted she had destroyed any right to immediate forgiveness and accepted it. Her voice sounded different than I had ever heard it. Smaller. Less certain. Ethan asked her to begin correcting the lies she'd told about me to every family member who had heard them. He stated that if she was serious about making amends, she needed to actively repair the damage she had done to my reputation. Madeline agreed without argument. This surprised both of us. She asked if she could send a gift to Lillian. Ethan looked at me, and I considered it for a moment before nodding. He told his mother to send something small to our address. The call ended shortly thereafter. We sat in the silence of our living room, and I felt strange. Not really relieved. Not hopeful. Just less stressed than I had been in months. Approximately 10 days passed. Lillian learned to clap her hands together, and we celebrated as if she had won a prize. Life resumed its usual rhythm of feedings, naps, and laundry. Then, a package arrived. The return address was Madeline's. I carefully opened it on the kitchen counter, with Ethan watching over my shoulder. Inside was a baby blanket made of soft yellow yarn with white edging. The stitching was neat and carefully done by hand. There was also a book for children about a rabbit family. A note card rested on top. Madeline stated that she made the blanket herself and hoped Lillian would use it. She reminisced about Ethan's love of soft blankets as a baby and assumed Lillian did as well. The gesture was more personal than expensive gifts could have been. It felt like real effort rather than money. I ran my fingers over the blanket's texture and felt a slight shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not trusting. Just a small shift toward the possibility of reconciliation in the future. Ethan placed the blanket over Lillian during her next nap. She grabbed the edge with her tiny fist and brought it close to her face. I took a photo of her sleeping with it and saved it on my phone without sharing it with anyone. 3 days later, Grant phoned Ethan. I was washing bottles in the sink when Ethan called and put it on speaker. Grant mentioned that he needed to tell us something. He claimed Madeline had actively corrected family members who still believed her previous accusations. She was telling them she was completely mistaken about me. She claimed that her own problems harmed the reputation of a good person. Grant stated that he had heard this from 4 different relatives independently. He explained that Madeline was not simply apologizing to us in private. She was performing the public service of repairing what she'd broken. This information was important. It demonstrated changed behavior beyond simply writing us a nice letter. It demonstrated her willingness to be uncomfortable and admit her mistakes to those who might judge her for them. Ethan thanked Grant for informing us. After he hung up, I stood at the sink, hands in soapy water, trying to figure out how I was feeling. I called Claire that afternoon. We met in a coffee shop near my apartment while Ethan stayed at home with Lillian. I told her all about the letter, the blanket, and Grant's call. I inquired whether I was being overly cautious or not cautious enough. Claire stirred sugar into her coffee and looked at me intently. She said it was reasonable to protect my daughter from someone who had been calling her mother a cheater and liar for several months. She reminded me that Madeline did not simply insult me privately. She attempted to persuade an entire family that I had kidnapped her son and passed off another man's baby as his. She said I had control over the terms of any reconciliation, and that making Madeline earn back trust was appropriate. I drove home feeling more secure in my boundaries. That evening, Ethan and I sat at the dining table with a notebook. We outlined specific conditions for any future contact with Madeline. She would never speak negatively about me in front of her family again. Visits will be supervised. She had to accept our parenting choices without criticism. The first sign of her old behavior resulted in an immediate return to no contact. We documented everything in clear language. We both signed at the bottom. Ethan scanned the document and emailed a copy to his parents. Richard called back within 90 minutes. He claimed the conditions were excessive. He claimed we were treating Madeline like a criminal after she had already apologized. Ethan informed his father that these were non-negotiable terms, and that if they could not accept them, the estrangement would continue. Then Madeline's voice came over the phone. She must have got it from Richard. She told him to stay quiet. She stated that she accepted all of the conditions without reservation. She asked when she could meet Lillian in person. Ethan stated that we needed at least 6 weeks of consistent good behavior before we would consider it. Madeline agreed. During that time, Vanessa provided updates. Madeline was correcting past lies with her extended family. She was working on herself. Vanessa reported that Madeline had begun seeing a therapist to address her controlling behavior and pride issues. The information felt like genuine effort, as if Madeline was actually attempting to change rather than simply saying the right words to get what she wanted. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Madeline to become impatient, defensive, or demanding. But weeks passed, and she remained consistent. She sent Vanessa brief updates on her therapy sessions. She did not push for a faster reconciliation. She made no excuses or downplayed what she had done. I began to wonder if seeing those photos of Lillian had actually broken something in her. Perhaps missing months of her granddaughter's life forced her to confront the consequences of her pride. My mother arrived the following weekend with her usual bags of groceries and a container of soup she had prepared the night before. I met her at the door with Lillian on my hip, and she immediately took the baby from me and began making those grandmother noises that always made Lillian happy. She carried her granddaughter into the kitchen while I brought in the groceries, and by the time I arrived, she'd already sat in a chair with Lillian in her lap, examining her tiny fingers as if they contained secrets. I heated the soup while she played with the baby, and we ate lunch at the kitchen table with Lillian and her bouncer between us. After we had finished eating, I told her about Madeline's letter and everything it contained. I described the conditions that Ethan and I had written down and how we had sent them to his parents. I described Richard's reaction and how Madeline accepted everything without question. My mother listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her expression serious but not surprised. After I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said she was proud of me for setting firm boundaries while still allowing for reconciliation if Madeline proved herself. She reminded me that I needed to always prioritize protecting myself and my daughter. Then she warned me to keep an eye out for any signs of Madeline's old patterns returning, because people could say the right words without changing their behavior. She advised me to trust my instincts and not let guilt cloud my judgment about what was safe for my daughter. Hearing her say that made something settle in my chest because there were times when I needed someone to confirm I wasn't being unreasonable or cruel. 6 weeks passed, and Madeline maintained her good behavior despite Vanessa's reports. She kept correcting her lies to family members. She continued going to therapy. She sent one brief note through Vanessa, asking if we had received the blanket and hoping Lillian liked it, but she did not press for more contact or complain about the timeline. Ethan and I discussed it several times during those weeks, always returning to the same question of whether his mother was truly changing or simply acting to achieve her goals. Finally, we decided to try a supervised meeting in the park 4 blocks from our apartment. The location felt safe because we could leave right away if something went wrong, and it was neutral territory, so Madeline couldn't corner us or cause a scene. Vanessa offered to come along as a buffer, which we accepted because having a witness made the situation feel less dangerous. She promised to stay close but give us space, ready to intervene if Madeline displayed any signs of her old behavior. We scheduled it for the following Saturday morning at 10:30, giving ourselves the entire day to recover if necessary. I didn't get much sleep the night before the meeting. I kept playing out scenarios in my head, imagining how Madeline would react to seeing Lillian in person. Would she be able to conceal her resentment for me? Would she say something passive-aggressive that seemed innocent but contained her old venom? Would she try to take Lillian from my arms, claiming that some grandmother had the right to hold her first? Every time I started to fall asleep, another worry would wake me up, and I'd find myself staring at the ceiling in the dark. Ethan woke up around 4 a.m. and found me sitting up in bed. He drew me back against his chest, wrapping his arms around me. He promised that if his mother reverted to her previous behavior we would leave immediately. He reminded me that I was in charge of this meeting, and Madeline was only able to see Lillian because I allowed it. His voice was steady and certain in the darkness, and I fell asleep around 5 p.m., with his hand rubbing slow circles across my back. Saturday morning came too quickly. We prepared Lillian and packed her diaper bag with extra supplies, despite the fact that we would only be gone for about 90 minutes. Ethan loaded the stroller into the car while I buckled Lillian into her car seat, and we didn't talk much on the short drive to the park. When we arrived, Vanessa was already sitting on a bench near the playground, holding a coffee cup. She waved when she saw us but did not approach, allowing us to get Lillian out of the car and into the stroller at our own pace. The park was crowded with other families enjoying the spring weather, children running around the playground equipment, and parents pushing swings. It felt surreal to meet Madeline in this normal, cheerful setting after months of estrangement. We walked slowly toward the meeting spot, and that's when I noticed her. Madeline sat alone on a bench near the fountain, wearing a simple blue sweater that I had never seen before. She appeared smaller, older. Her shoulders curved forward like she was trying to make herself less noticeable. When she saw us approaching with the stroller, she stood up quickly but didn't move toward us. Her hand went to her mouth, and even from a distance, I could see her eyes filling with tears. She started crying before we even reached her, and my whole body went tense. I couldn't tell if these were manipulative tears meant to make us feel guilty or genuine emotion from seeing her granddaughter for the first time in months. We stopped about 12 feet away from her, and Ethan's hand found mine. Madeline stayed where she was, still crying but not approaching, and I realized she was waiting for permission. Ethan cleared his throat and told her she could come closer to see Lillian. She walked toward us carefully, like she was afraid we'd change our minds and run. When she reached the stroller, she knelt down beside it instead of standing over it, putting herself at Lillian's level. She just looked at our daughter for a long moment without saying anything. Lillian was awake and alert, her unusual eyes tracking the movement of other kids in the park. Madeline's hand hovered near the stroller handle but didn't touch it. Then she spoke, her voice rough from crying. She said, "Lillian was beautiful. She said she looked exactly like Ethan did as a baby, the same nose and chin and eyes. There was no defensiveness in her voice when she said it. No hint of the woman who'd insisted for months that the resemblance didn't exist, just sadness and what sounded like regret. I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of the woman who'd accused me of trapping her son. I looked for the subtle digs disguised as compliments, the passive-aggressive comments about my parenting, the cold judgment in her eyes when she looked at me. But Madeline seemed genuinely humbled and ashamed as she knelt by the stroller. She looked up at me after a moment, tears still running down her face. She said she was sorry for everything she'd put me through. She said she was wrong about me from the very start, from the first family dinner when she decided I wasn't good enough for her son. She said she understood if I never fully forgave her because what she'd done was unforgivable. Her voice broke on that last word, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of believing she might actually mean what she was saying. Ethan asked his mother why she spread those lies about me, his voice harder than I'd heard it in weeks. Madeline stayed kneeling by the stroller but turned to look at him. She admitted she felt like she was losing control of her son's life and couldn't accept that he'd chosen someone without her approval. She said she'd spent his whole childhood imagining the woman he'd marry, someone from their social circle with the right family background. And when he brought me home instead, she couldn't let go of that fantasy. She said the pregnancy made it real in a way she couldn't deny anymore. So she'd tried to create doubt about me and about Lillian because if she could make everyone else question my character, maybe she could convince herself she'd been right all along. She said seeing how much Lillian looked like Ethan in those recent photos forced her to confront that she'd been lying to herself and everyone else because of her own insecurity and need for control. Her hands were shaking as she spoke, and I could see the effort it took for her to say these things out loud. The visit lasted about 45 minutes. Madeline kept appropriate distance the whole time, never trying to hold Lillian without permission or reach into the stroller to touch her. She asked thoughtful questions about the baby's development, when she started sleeping through the night, whether she was eating well, if she'd started teething yet. She complimented my parenting when I answered, saying I was clearly doing an amazing job because Lillian looked so healthy and happy. There were no passive-aggressive digs hidden in her words, no subtle implications that I was doing something wrong. When Lillian started fussing, Madeline stepped back to give me space to pick her up and comfort her. She watched me settle the baby against my shoulder and something in her face looked almost wistful. I started to believe she might actually be capable of change, that the therapy and time away from us had broken something open in her. As we prepared to leave, gathering up the diaper bag and getting ready to put Lillian back in the stroller, Madeline asked if we might consider another visit in a few weeks. Her voice was hesitant, like she was afraid of pushing too hard. Ethan looked at me for the decision, and I appreciated that he was letting me control this. I thought about the last 45 minutes, how Madeline had respected every boundary we'd set, how she'd stayed at a distance and waited for permission for everything. I told her we could try monthly supervised visits for now. I explained that if she continued respecting our boundaries and treating me with respect, we could gradually increase contact over time. I made it clear that this was conditional, and that any return to her old behavior would mean immediate return to no contact. Madeline thanked me with genuine gratitude in her voice. She said she knew she had to earn back our trust and that she was willing to do whatever it took for however long it took. She didn't try to hug me or push for more than I was offering. She didn't ask to hold Lillian or suggest we come to her house for the next visit. She just accepted what I'd said and thanked us for giving her this chance. She stood back while we got Lillian settled in the stroller, and she was still standing there watching us when we walked away. For the first time since I'd met her, Madeline had truly respected my boundaries without trying to negotiate or manipulate her way around them. On the drive home, Lillian fell asleep in her car seat within minutes. Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand while keeping his eyes on the road. He asked how I was feeling about everything. I told him I was cautiously optimistic but still watching for any sign of Madeline slipping back into her old patterns. He nodded and said he understood my caution completely. Then he told me he was proud of how I handled the meeting. He said my willingness to give his mother a chance, even with all the strict conditions, meant everything to him. I looked out the window and said I wasn't doing it for Madeline. I was doing it for him and for Lillian because they both deserved the chance at having a grandmother if she could actually change. He squeezed my hand tighter and didn't say anything else for the rest of the drive. Over the next 3 months we scheduled 4 more supervised visits with Madeline at the same park. Each visit went smoothly without any problems. Madeline maintained respectful behavior the entire time and never once criticized me or questioned our parenting choices. She brought small thoughtful gifts for Lillian at each visit. A soft stuffed rabbit. A set of board books. A musical toy that played gentle lullabies. She always asked permission before taking photos of Lillian. She stayed at whatever distance we indicated was appropriate. She complimented how well Lillian was developing without making it sound like a surprise. When Lillian started crawling between visits, Madeline celebrated the milestone with genuine excitement and no comments about whether she was early or late compared to Ethan as a baby. She was showing us through consistent actions that she understood she was on probation and couldn't afford any mistakes. Grant called Ethan one evening to tell us something interesting he'd noticed at a family gathering. Extended family members had been commenting on the change in Madeline's behavior and attitude. She'd been consistently correcting the record about me whenever anyone brought up the old accusations. When someone mentioned the paternity concerns at a cousin's birthday party, Madeline immediately shut it down and told them she'd been completely wrong about everything. She apologized to the whole group for spreading lies about me and said I was a wonderful mother and wife. Grant said several relatives were shocked because they'd never heard Madeline admit she was wrong about anything before. After Grant's call, several relatives reached out to me directly to apologize for believing Madeline's lies. I accepted their apologies while mentally noting who had stood by me from the beginning and who had needed proof before changing their minds. Ethan and I celebrated our 4th wedding anniversary on a quiet evening at home with Lillian between us on the couch. She was playing with her feet and making happy babbling sounds. Ethan put his arm around me and pulled me close. He told me that watching me stand firm on boundaries while still allowing room for his mother's redemption showed him what real strength looks like. Our relationship with Madeline would probably never be warm or close the way some families are. But we'd established a new dynamic where I controlled all the terms and she respected my authority as Lillian's mother. Our little family stayed protected while allowing supervised grandmother visits that might gradually become less tense over time. I kissed Ethan and looked down at our daughter. She had his eyes and his smile and absolutely no doubt about where she came from. That was enough for me. My 7-year-old and I were at a shelter when a black sedan arrived. My grandma asked, "Why aren't you living in your house?" At a family shelter, my 7-year-old daughter and I were spotted by my affluent grandmother. "Why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" she inquired. I was taken aback. "Which house?" My parents turned pale when I showed up at a family gathering 4 days later. I can give you a quick rundown of what it's like to try to get a 7-year-old ready for school while they're in a family shelter. It's similar to managing a small airport, but with more emotional passengers. You're doing it all with one sock missing, and the security line is a disgrace. Sophie's sock was missing that morning. She whispered, "Mom," as children do when they want to keep you from falling apart. "It's all right. I can wear different socks." She displayed a white sock that had once been white and a pink sock with a unicorn on it. I gazed at them as if they were forensic evidence. I remarked, "It's a bold fashion choice." Sophie grinned and said, "Yes. I do what I want." And then, in an instant, I lost track of our location. The cold snapped me back to reality as the shelter door opened behind us. We were outside the Street Bridge family shelter. 6:28 a.m. The gray sky remained bruised. There was moisture on the sidewalk. The air smelled of winter, clean and metallic, as if the world had been scrubbed too thoroughly. The backpack Sophie was carrying was larger than she was. I pulled her puffy coat's zipper up while avoiding eye contact with the sign above the door. Shelter for families. I didn't even understand the word shelter. It was the term family. As if we were a class. As if we were a box label. "All right," I said, trying to sound brighter. Sophie nodded and said, "School bus in 7 minutes." She was courageous in a subtle way that simultaneously made me feel guilty and proud. Then she whispered, "Does Mrs. Bennett still require me to give my address?" My stomach tightened. I said, "I doubt she'll ask today." Sophie refrained from pushing. "Mom," she said, looking down at her shoes and then back up at me as if she was trying to remember my face and make sure I was still me. "Will we be moving again?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. A black sedan then slid to the curb as if it were supposed to. It wasn't a taxi, it wasn't an Uber, and it wasn't the type of vehicle that ever arrived at Street Bridge unless it made a mistake and later regretted it. A woman in a midnight-colored tailored coat emerged as the door opened. My grandmother, Margot Pierce. It has been more than a year since I last saw her. She belonged firmly in the before, and I knew that because my life had been measured in both the before and after everything fell apart. She appeared calm, graceful, and a little frightening as usual. I once raised an eyebrow to end a boardroom argument, but not in a cruel way. Her eyes first fell on me, And I saw that she recognized me, then was perplexed, and finally it fell on Sophie. Her face underwent a sudden, sharp change that resembled a crack in glass. After glancing up at the sign above the entrance, she turned back to face me and said, "Ava." My name sounded odd in her voice, as if she hadn't spoken it aloud in a while. "Why are you in this place?" My initial reaction was to lie because I couldn't bear to be seen, not because I thought she would judge me. I said, "I'm fine," which is the standard deception of worn-out women everywhere. "We're all right, it's only temporary." Margot's gaze shifted to Sophie's mismatched socks before settling on my hands, which were dry and red from too much life, too much cold, and too much sanitizer. Her voice became softer. "Ava," she repeated, "why do you not reside in your Hawthorne Street home?" The world swayed. I gave her a blink. "What am I?" She didn't say the same thing over and over again as if I were dumb. As if she was afraid I might faint, she repeated herself. She pronounced the words. "The house." When I heard the words on Hawthorne Street, my heart began to race so rapidly that I could feel it in my throat. "Which house?" I heard myself say that. Margot looked at me as though I had said something in a foreign language. "I don't have a house." The calculation behind her eyes was visible to me. She was mentally calculating numbers. Lies, possibilities, and timelines. My sleeve was pulled by Sophie. "Mom," she muttered. "Do we own a home?" I glanced down at her. Her eyes were wide and painfully hopeful. I took a swallow. "No," I said softly, "my dear. We don't." Margot's expression became extremely still. And my grandmother's expression usually indicated that something was going to shatter. She took a step toward Sophie. Not at me. It was almost startling when she knelt before her. No one was crouching for Margot Pierce. She forced everyone else to adapt while sitting in chairs that cost more than my monthly salary. However, she was there. Lowering herself to the level of my daughter. "I take it you're Sophie?" she asked. "Yes," Sophie said timidly in a whisper. Margot's face softened a little. Margot's face. "That's a lovely name," she said, raising her gaze to mine before becoming acerbic once more. She said, "Get in the car." I gave a blink. "Grandma," she reiterated. "Get in the car." And her tone made no allowances for compromise. My face started to get hot. Anger, humiliation, and relief were all mixed together. Margot unlocked the sedan's rear door. I paused. Sophie glanced up at me and said, "Mom," in a quiet, steady voice. "It's all right." The last straw was that my 7-year-old was consoling me. I gave a nod. "All right." Sophie grabbed her backpack and climbed into the back seat first, and I slid in next to her, half expecting someone to pat me on the shoulder and clarify that there had been a misunderstanding. The silence inside felt pricey as soon as the door closed. Margot didn't start driving right away. She simply sat there staring straight ahead with both hands lightly resting on the steering wheel. And then she talked very quietly. My stomach turned over when she said, "I will know who did this by tonight." She looked up at me. I took a deep breath. "Grandma, I don't get it." "No," she replied. "You don't. And that tells me everything." She took her phone out, gave it a quick tap, and said, "Call Graham." A man picked it up right away. She said, "This is Margot, Miss Pierce. Get the Hawthorne Street property manager on the line." I need a straightforward response. Who is in possession of the keys? Who resides there? And has anyone been making money off of it? My blood chilled. Cash? I gazed at her profile, the expression on her face, and the composed manner in which she spoke as if placing an order for coffee. And I understood that I wasn't just ashamed. I was perched on the brink of something considerably darker. I would have laughed if you had asked me 8 months ago if I ever imagined myself and my daughter living in a shelter. I believed it couldn't happen to me. Not that it couldn't happen in general. By the way, that is a dangerous form of arrogance. You are not protected by it. It simply amplifies the sound of the fall. I was still employed as a nursing assistant at St. Jude's Medical Center, 8 months prior. Call lights going off like a slot machine, 14-hour shifts, and people requesting things I didn't have. Miracles, time, and answers. Even though I was worn out, I was making it. After that, I went to live with my parents. It was meant to be short-lived. Temporary is always the first step. Thomas, my father, had that cool, collected voice that people trust. Even when she was interrupting you at the knees, My mother Elaine's gentle smile gave the impression that she was doing you a favor. I now addressed them by their first names. Mom and Dad were no longer compatible. Until you get back on your feet, you can remain with us, Elaine said. Sophie requires consistency. I should have heard the fine print concealed in that sentence, but I didn't. Family supports family. It was bearable at first. Despite the small size of my parents' apartment, we managed to make it work. My old room was where Sophie slept. I had a job. I made the best payment I could. I lowered my head. Then the remarks began. Not large. Overt assaults. Little ones, the ones that, when later mentioned to someone, don't appear to be cruel. Elaine would say. You're always exhausted. When Sophie's toys were on the ground, Thomas would sigh and say, maybe you should organize your life better. All we're trying to do is keep the place nice. Then, one evening, Elaine sat down at the kitchen table as if she were going to give me a diagnosis after I had returned home from a double shift with my feet hurting and my brain half dead. We must speak, she stated. That tone was familiar to me already. She whispered. We believe it's time you gained your independence. We current it's time you gained your independence. You've spent enough time here, I said in a steady voice. I'm trying. Deposits are high, rent is high. You're a mom. Elaine remarked. You'll figure it out if you're a good mother. Aim on. I actually looked around as if someone else had said those words because they struck me so strongly. Thomas cleared his throat. 45 days. That makes sense. We are not beasts. I wanted to scream, but in that apartment, it never worked. It merely provided them with a point of reference. I nodded as a result. All right, and I made an effort. During my hospital breaks, I browsed listings with my thumbs while downing cafeteria coffee. I made phone calls. I repeatedly heard the same thing. The first and final month. Credit check. Proof of income. And deposit. We apologize. We selected a different applicant. With Sophie on my back, I felt like I was running uphill every day. Then came the evening when they concluded that 45 days was, in fact, a suggestion. After a late shift. That is. I had cleaned up a spilled tray, helped a bewildered old man back into bed 3 times, and held a woman's hand as she sobbed because she was afraid of surgery. After midnight, I returned home. Outside my parents' apartment, the hallway light was on. Immediately, my stomach constricted. Outside the door were 2 cardboard boxes. My boxes. For a long moment, I stared at them as if my brain couldn't comprehend the shape of what I was seeing. I tried the doorknob next. Locked. I knocked. Quiet. I knocked once more forcefully. The door cracked open at last. Elaine's expression seemed composed, as though this were just another Tuesday. You should speak more quietly, she said sharply. Neighbors, why are my belongings outside? I made a demand. Bored, Thomas's voice came from behind her. Ava, we told you. Autonomy. I trembled as I said. It hasn't been 45 days. Elaine's face became slightly sterner. Plans are subject to change. I looked into the doorway over her shoulder. Sophie was half asleep on the floor near the shoe rack, with her shoes still on and her little jacket folded under her head like a pillow. It seemed as though they had placed her there hours earlier so I could pick her up and leave without waking the entire apartment. Where should we go? I growled. A thin, contented smile returned to Elaine's face. You'll work it out. You always do. Then she added. Don't make a scene. As if she were helping me. The air was buzzing in my ears as I stood in the hallway with my boxes. I barely made it inside before crouching and slipping my arms beneath Sophie. With a little drowsiness, she instinctively put her arms around my neck. Elaine's hand was already on the door as I retreated into the hallway. The door shut. Sophie stirred. Mom. She muttered. I automatically lied and said, it's okay. There will be a sleepover. I loaded the boxes into my vehicle and got behind the wheel. Most of that night is lost in my memory. Streetlights are something I recall. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, as I recall. Sophie was sleeping across the back seat of the car when I was sitting there, her little body curled up like a question mark. I recall repeatedly asking myself, how did this happen? I tried to fix it the following day because that's what I do. I make things right. I clean up the mess. I help those who are unable to help themselves. I gave Elaine a call. She didn't respond. I gave Thomas a call. He gave one response. As if he were reciting a script, he said, We're doing this because we love you. Tough love. He hung up after that. Since the rent I didn't have would not cover itself, I still went to work. By day 4, my stomach ached from the cheap food at the gas station, and my cheeks were hollow from stress. I gave a motel a try. The money ran out after 1 or 2 nights. Sophie was quiet, so a school counselor noticed and inquired about her well-being. I told a lie. Then the counselor gently asked again, and I noticed Sophie observing me with those large eyes, picking up survival skills from me by lying. After telling the truth, Sophie sat next to me and swung her legs as I filled out shelter intake forms 3 days later. Despite her kindness, the intake worker seemed worn out from seeing too much. She stated, "We need your information. We must know where you spent the night before." "In my vehicle," I replied. Like she was checking a box. She nodded. "Is this our house now?" Sophie whispered too loudly as she leaned in my direction. The woman winced. I grinned too much. "No," I blurted out. I wanted to add that this is only temporary, but the word sounded like a joke. "No, sweetheart." Sophie dozed off on a small bed next to me that evening in a room that smelled like overcooked food and bleach. As I lay awake, I could hear other families behind thin walls coughing, babies crying, and someone repeatedly saying, "It's okay," as if in prayer. I was holding my phone. I considered giving my grandmother a call. It wasn't like you called Margot Pierce to cry. When you needed a solution to a problem, she was the type of woman you called. However, my mother had trained me not to bother her for years. Elaine used to say that your grandmother detested drama. She dislikes being weak. Avoid making a fool of yourself. After the lockout, I texted Elaine to ask if Margot knew what was going on, and she immediately replied, "Grandma is abroad. She's occupied. Keep her out of this." When my mother wanted something, she could respond to a text message so quickly that it was amazing. I therefore didn't call. I assured myself that I could manage it. I told myself that I didn't want to appear pitiful. I made a lot of promises to myself. Then, on a chilly winter morning, my grandmother asked me why I wasn't residing in my Hawthorne Street home after getting out of a black sedan outside a shelter. And I came to see that my housing issue wasn't the only one. Someone had been lying for a long time. And I had a family issue. Margot's call was already underway back in the sedan. Margot's side, which was sharp enough to cut glass, was the only voice I heard. "Who gave the keys their signature?" "A beat. And the house is occupied." I felt sick to my stomach. Margot didn't show signs of surprise. She responded as if her suspicions were confirmed. "Give Graham the file," she instructed. "Everything." At last, she looked at me with certainty rather than sympathy after hanging up the phone. With trembling thumbs, I texted Sophie's school once. "Emergency in the family. Today, Sophie will not be present." No essay, no explanation. Just the truth in the least obscenely small package I could put together. 12 minutes away, Margot drove to a diner with warm windows, a bell on the door, and syrup-smelling menus. I nearly sobbed from the shock of being warm after the heater inside blasted my face so intensely. A booth was slid into place. Sophie went straight to the children's menu and began coloring a cartoon pancake as if it were a personal slight. Without asking Sophie, Margot placed an order for hot chocolate. I experienced an odd wave of rage as I watched her do it. Not at the universe. Not at Margot. Because my parents had chosen everything else, and it was that simple to be nice. Once more, Margot raised her phone. I started to say, "Grandma," but stopped because I didn't know what I was even requesting. "Which home?" "You're here. But why? How did my life turn into a sign for a shelter?" Margot didn't respond to my inquiries in the sequence that my panic demanded. "I'm going to make another call," she said coolly. "You'll pay attention and refrain from interjecting." I gave a nod. When you're on the operating table, you nod to the surgeon in that manner. She put the phone on speaker and tapped the screen. 2 rings later, my mother's voice could be heard. Sweet and intelligent, Elaine seemed to be trying out for the part of a devoted parent in a community theater play. "Oh my God, what a surprise, Margot. How are you doing?" Margot's voice remained soft and pleasant. She remarked, "I was thinking about Ava. How is she doing?" My stomach dropped into my shoes. There was a microsecond of silence, the minuscule moment when a liar chooses which version of events is most helpful. Elaine then gave a confident, fluid response, as if she had been rehearsing the phrase in front of a mirror. She remarked, "Oh, she's doing great. She resides in the home. She has made her home. She adores it. We didn't bother you because, as you are aware, Ava wanted her space. I looked at the sticky table as though it would burst open and engulf me. Sophie was humming to herself, and coloring quietly across from me. Although she couldn't understand the words, she could understand the tone. After glancing up once to see my face, she immediately resumed coloring more vigorously, as if she could erase the issue with a single stroke. Elaine continued to talk, brimming the pause with happy platitudes about how busy she had been, how proud she was, and how important family is. Margot gave her permission. Margot was not a hasty liar. She allowed them space to properly hang themselves. Margot said, "That's good to hear," at the end, and abruptly ended the call. No conflict, no charges, no gotcha. My throat constricted. It wasn't confusion that Margot said in a low voice. I laughed until it sounded like a cough. I said, "So she knew." She was aware the entire time. Margot maintained a steady, piercing gaze on me. She claimed, she knew enough to lie without thinking. That provides me with the information I require. "Look, Mom," Sophie said, sliding her coloring page in my direction. I forced a quick smile that probably looked painful. "I made the pancake purple." I exclaimed, "Wow. That pancake is really brave." Sophie laughed, and my chest briefly relaxed. Then Margot lowered her voice, leaned in, and uttered the straightforward phrase that I ought to have heard months ago. She said, "I set up a house for you. Hawthorne Street. Your parents were expected to handle everything, including the move-in, keys, and handoff." My mind attempted to comprehend what they had told me was finished. My parents had been living their lives as if that sentence didn't exist. And they had a house for us. I clutched the booth's edge until my knuckles turned white. "Why don't you tell me straight out?" I felt foolish as soon as I heard myself ask, as if I was placing the blame on the lone person who had arrived. Margot did not recoil. She explained. "Because I trusted your parents. That was my error. Not yours." She then got up, moved a short distance away to avoid Sophie's ears, and made 2 brief phone calls. Clipped. Low voice. Effective. I only managed to catch fragments. Tenant payments. Listing history, key log, Hawthorne, file, and clean summary. Indeed, today, she didn't sit down as she had intended to do when she returned. She took a seat as if she were going to move. She declared, "You're not returning to that shelter." My pride attempted to assert itself. It was pushed back down by my fatigue. I muttered, "Okay." Which was the most truthful thing I had said all day. The world had never been cruel when Sophie was bouncing on a hotel bed like a trampoline an hour later. She discovered the small complimentary soap, gave it a dramatic sniff, and declared that it smelled like a fancy grandmother. With her phone in hand, Margot stood by the window, observing traffic as if she were observing a battlefield. She withheld some information from me. She was not required to. Details weren't the point yet. The idea was that something was going on, and I didn't have to handle it by myself. Sophie slept that night with her stuffed rabbit under her chin in crisp sheets, and then Margot sat at the little table by the window and spoke once more. She said, "Your parents are throwing an event. A location, family, speeches, the entire performance, all of these are important to them." My stomach clenched. "When?" Margot's eyes remained fixed on the city lights. "Soon," she said. "We'll be there, too." It wasn't a threat when she said it. She spoke as if she had already made up her mind. After 5 days, I found myself standing in the hotel bathroom, gazing at my reflection. I appeared to have been hung up to dry in a storm after being put through a washing cycle. Margot had insisted that I purchase a dress. It's a simple, clean, and inexpensive one. She had said, "You don't need armor. You need dignity." I liked the sentiment, but I wasn't sure dignity could be found in polyester. Sophie was dressed in tights and a small blue dress. "I look like a princess," she said after twirling once in the hotel room. "Do you agree?" My throat constricted as I spoke. My stomach twisted so much during the ride that I felt like throwing up. "What happens if I get cold?" Silently, I asked. Margot avoided eye contact with me. "I'll talk after that." "What if everything is denied?" "They will," Margot remarked. "What if I didn't even have a word for it, and everyone assumed I was stopped?" Then Margot looked at me, her eyes steady but piercing. "Ava," she uttered. The car pulled up outside a place I would never have chosen in my life, and I said, "You've survived worse than a room full of liars." It was one of those hotel event rooms with the hard smiles and the soft lighting. Pierce Caldwell family dinner. Of course it did, according to the sign by the entrance. My mother enjoyed events because she liked the witnesses, not because she liked people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, relatives I hadn't seen in months, people with opinions, and casseroles were all inside. However, the casseroles had been swapped out for catered orbs that were presented on trays like little edible gifts, since my mother couldn't serve dinner without also serving a story. A projector screen and microphone were set up at the far end of the room. Margot stopped at a side door and had a quick conversation with a staff member before we entered. With a nod, a woman opened a small, private room adjacent to the banquet hall. It was warm, peaceful, and filled with crackers and water bottles. Margot said, "This is for Sophie." Sophie cautiously entered the room and gave Margot a serious look before saying, "She doesn't need to be in the center of this." "Am I given snacks?" "Yes," Margot replied. "Good ones." Sophie took that as gospel. A dependable helper accompanied her. Unaware that she was being shielded from the family apocalypse, Sophie waved at me. "You go in first," Margot said, glancing at me. I was aware of her actions. Before they saw her, let them see me. Allow them to panic in silence. I entered the banquet room by myself. The conversation subsided and then continued as people usually do when they have a feeling but don't want to be the first to admit it. Elaine then noticed me. Her smile came on its own, then faltered like a poor Wi-Fi signal. She glanced at my dress, my posture, and the fact that I was no longer wearing "I'm drowning" on my face. Her hands gripped her wine glass more tightly. A moment later, Thomas realized that his jaw was clenched as if he were biting down on a thought, and his laughter had stopped midway. They didn't approach me. They didn't inquire about my whereabouts. They didn't inquire about Sophie's well-being. They took the usual action when attempting to estimate the level of danger. They waited. Grinning. I positioned myself close to the room's edge and allowed the quiet to do its thing. Sometimes the only thing keeping you from yelling is dry humor. I allowed myself to think for a moment. Observe us. A meal with the family. The kind where everyone acts as though the seating arrangement is the most crucial factor. The temperature in the room changed after a minute. Calm, leisurely, and totally composed, Margot Pierce came in. A man who appeared to have never raised his voice in his life because he didn't need to was standing next to her. He had a laptop bag and a slim folder. Elaine turned pale. "It's more like, I just realized my entire plan has a hole in it, rather than, oh, you surprised me pale." When Thomas wanted to look like the victim before he was accused of anything, he straightened his shoulders in that manner. Margot gave a few relatives a nod as if she were just there for dinner. She then turned to face my mom. "Elaine," said Margot breezily. My mother's smile tightened as she said, "I'd like to clarify something you told me before we eat." "Mom, of course." Margot's tone remained composed. "You informed me that Ava resided in the Hawthorne Street home," she remarked, not because Hawthorne Street suddenly became important to everyone, but rather because everyone's attention was drawn to Elaine's face. The room fell silent. Elaine's gaze flickered. As though her glass had grown heavy, she put it down. She laughed too quickly and said, "Well, yes, Margot raised a hand. "We shouldn't use guesswork for this," Margot stated. She nodded to the man with the laptop and said, "Let's do it with facts." Like he had done it 1,000 times before, he moved forward and plugged into the projector at the venue. The first slide showed up. Street Hawthorne. An overview. There was a whisper in the room. Elaine's jaw dropped. Nothing emerged. Margot didn't sound like she was delivering a speech in court. She talked as if she could read the weather. The screen displayed a straightforward line to correspond with her statement that this house was arranged for Ava and Sophie. Next slide. Elaine Pierce Caldwell was given the keys. July. For a moment, Margot let that sit. Next, another slide. A screenshot of the listing. The Hawthorne house was advertised as a rental property with furnishings. Pictures of the bedroom, kitchen, and living room. Individuals leaned forward. Elaine's hands began to tremble. A lease summary follows. Names were hazy. Dates are displayed. Tenants took up residence. August. Then came the slide that silenced the entire room. A page from the property manager file with payment instructions. Elaine and Thomas provided the rent payout account. Margot didn't raise her voice. She looked around the room to make sure everyone heard her say, "Elaine, you didn't just take the keys. You had the rent transferred to an account under your control while you rented out the house intended for my granddaughter and my great-granddaughter." In an attempt to reclaim the room, Thomas was the first to yell. "This is not proper," he growled. "This is a family gathering. This is a family gathering." Margot looked over at him. "Yes," she replied. "I am doing it here for that reason." Thin and desperate, Elaine found her voice. "We intended to inform her," she uttered hastily. "It was only temporary." "We required." "Temporary," Margot said again. Her gaze strayed to the adjacent room where Sophie was, invisible yet there. The room fell silent when Margot said, "You displaced a child." After a brief pause, she completed the phrase, "For profit." Someone let out a gasp. "You've got to be kidding," someone murmured, and Elaine began to cry real tears this time. "We owed money," she sobbed. "You don't get it." Margot's face remained unchanged. She remarked, "I understand enough." She turned slightly so that everyone could hear her say, "And I'm done funding your choices." She said plainly, "From now on, Elaine and Thomas don't get anything from me. No inheritance, no transfers, and no assistance." Thomas's expression contorted. "You can't." "I am able to," Margot replied. "And I did already." Calmly, the man with the folder moved forward. "Elaine Caldwell," he said courteously. "Thomas Caldwell." A uniformed officer stood close by and said, "These documents are for you." Just being there, without being dramatic or combative. Because scenes like this were not a gamble for Margot. Like they were radioactive. Elaine gazed at the papers. After taking them with trembling hands, Thomas glanced around the room and realized the worst part. This was no longer a fight. It was a public reputation collapse. Margot's tone remained steady. She said, "You won't get in touch with Ava. You'll cooperate and take responsibility for your actions." With wild eyes, Elaine turned to face me. "Ava," she pleaded. "Tell her to stop." Something inside of me became very clear. "We are family. You ought to have kept that in mind," I muttered. Elaine's face twisted as she said, "Before you turned my daughter's house into a business." I wasn't particularly happy. I was relieved. It was a relief to finally hear the truth. I was relieved I wasn't insane. I was relieved that Sophie would never have to experience the same humiliation that I had in order to learn how to smile. I left before the fallout. I opened the door to the private room after leaving the banquet area and going down the hallway. With her cheeks full of crackers, Sophie looked up. "Are we finished, Mom?" I knelt down and gave her a tight hug that made her squeak. "Yes," I muttered. "We're done," she said, leaning back and closely examining my face as if she were looking for storms. Then, she said quietly, "Is it okay if we go home?" I forcefully swallowed. "Yes," I replied. Margot met us in the hallway and said, "We can." She didn't turn to face the room. She didn't have to. Sophie slept in the car, leaning against my shoulder. My hands were shaking as I gazed out the window. "Grandma," I said in a whisper. "Now what?" Margot kept her gaze fixed on the road. "I won't say. Now we reclaim what was intended for you," she declared. "After 8 months, our lives are monotonous in the best possible way. We now reside on Hawthorne Street. Sophie has a crooked art gallery of drawings taped to the wall, her own room, and curtains of her own. She strolls to school as if everything has always been secure. The point is that I chose to remain a nursing assistant. Not because I had no other option. One step at a time, I'm completing my RN track, and for the first time, my focus is on the future rather than survival. My life was never paid for by Margot. She ensured that help could never be intercepted again, and arrived when it was most needed. She brings pastries on Sunday mornings, and acts as though she is only there to see Sophie. Sophie finds it hard to believe. "Grandma, Margot, do you like our house?" she will inquire. Every time, Margot pauses as if swallowing something heavy. "Yes, I do," she responds. It turns out that you can't rent out someone else's house, get paid, and continue to refer to it as family, as Elaine and Thomas discovered. The rent they collected was no longer free. They were compelled to pay it back, and the ensuing investigation destroyed their once respected reputation. Their hidden debts appeared like roaches under a flipped light switch after Margot cut them off. They were no longer invited. Calls were no longer returned. My mother attempted to get in touch with me to negotiate rather than to apologize. I'm done negotiating for basic decency, so I blocked the number. What do you think, then? Did Margot make the correct decision, or did she overreact? Tell me in the comments and sign up for. At 16, Dad shoved me into an October storm. Leave my house. No need for a sick daughter. 4 hours later, police said, CPS is already here. Can you imagine these words? That was the last thing my father said before pushing me into an October storm and locking the door. Leave my house. No need for a sick daughter. I was 16. No coat, phone, or money, just a school backpack with math homework, and rain soaking my sneakers. Police called him 4 hours later. His face turned ghostly white when he heard what they said. However, it was too late. Hi. Claire Callahan. In my Boston apartment, I'm 30 and watching rain roll down the glass. A letter is on my kitchen table. Shaky handwriting on inexpensive nursing home stationery. Dad wants to see me after 14 years in silence. Dying. He says. I apologize. Rain always reminds me of that night. The 22nd of October 2012. I recall coming home from school like any other Tuesday. Backpack over one shoulder, brain full of my recently passed math test. I thought about supper, homework, and the band poster I wanted to buy with my birthday money, normal 6-year-old stuff. I had no notion that in less than 3 hours, I would be wandering alone in a frigid blizzard, wondering if I would survive. When I entered that front door, I knew something was amiss. My father stood in the living room like a volcano poised to erupt. Raw flesh color was his face. He held a wad of cash and empty medication bottles with shaky hands. Madison, my sister, was behind him. She was 24 years older than me, and she looked anxious, heartbroken, like a loyal elder sister who had just found something dreadful about her tiny sibling. I noticed her eyes. I saw that flash she couldn't hide. Satisfaction. Denise, our stepmother, stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and lips pursed, saying nothing. She was skilled at remaining silent during disasters. My father wouldn't let me drop my backpack. He screamed like I burned the house. I allegedly stole from his wallet for months. I was buying and hiding medications in my room, he said. Madison found the proof, he said. I have cash in my drawers. My closet, pill bottles, texts proving I spoke to drug traffickers. I tried to explain. I claimed to have never touched his wallet. Never seen those drugs. Not even sure what he meant. I choked on the words when I realized something terrible. He didn't listen. His decision was made. Madison kept him fed falsehoods like poison wrapped in candy all day. She seemed devastated as she told him she tried so hard to help me. Urged me to quit. She didn't want to tell him, but she couldn't watch her younger sister harm herself. It was an Oscar-worthy performance, and my father believed every word. He bruised my arm and dragged me to the front door. My backpack was where I dropped it. It was scooped up and thrown against my chest so hard I fell backward. So he opened the door. Rain was falling in sheets. Distant thunder. The temperature has decreased 18 degrees since morning. Father stared me dead in the eyes and repeated those remarks. Leave my house. No need for a sick daughter. I was forced onto the porch. The door slammed. Deadbolt clicked. Suddenly, I was 16 and homeless. For maybe 6 minutes, I stood on that porch frozen. Shock, not cold. I kept expecting the door to open. Hoping someone will say it was a major misunderstanding. Nobody came. My phone was on my bedroom desk. Only what I had in my hands could be grabbed. My backpack included textbooks, a half-eaten granola bar, and nothing practical for a night out. No jacket, money, or helpline. 2012. Payphones exist, but who has quarters? Not a 6-year-old who bought band posters with her stipend. Right? Priorities? Straight A student, poor survival skills. So I walked. I didn't plan where to go. My body moved automatically to the one secure spot I knew. House of my grandmother, Eleanor, 8 miles away. Mommy's mom. The one person who always valued me. Driving 8 miles doesn't seem far. Walking in freezing rain in canvas sneakers without a coat feels like 800. Route 11 was gloomy and rainy ahead. Without stopping, cars sped by. I was a roadside shadow nobody wanted to look at. After 1 mile, my clothes were soaked to the skin. My fingertips went numb after the 2nd mile. My teeth were chattering so badly after the 3rd mile I thought they could crack. I kept walking. What else can I do? Return and urge my father to believe me. Already decided. I could only move forward, one numb step at a time. Hypothermia isn't noticed until it's almost too late. Your body shuts down, your brain fogs up, and sitting for a minute feels like the finest decision. A brief break to gather your breath. My legs gave up after 5 miles. There was a mailbox ahead. I thought I'd lean against it, collect my breath, and continue. Grandma's house was 3 miles away. It was possible, but my knees buckled before I arrived. The gravel rose quickly. And all went dark. 4 hours after throwing his daughter into a storm, my father's phone rang. The caller was chilly and professional. County Police Officer Brooks. An incident occurred. His daughter was found unresponsive on Route 11 hypothermic, taking her to County General Hospital. Please note that Child Protective Services has been alerted. A caseworker is present. We want to know why a 16-year-old girl was strolling alone in a storm without a coat or phone. We need you to bring your evidence to the hospital. My dad's face turned bone white. I learned from healthcare staff. They thought he appeared like a man watching his life slowly crumble. Madison was right next to him when the call came. The first time, her immaculate mask fell for a moment, but it was enough. It changed everything that night. The woman who found me asleep on the road was not a stranger driving home. Child Protective Services employed Diane Hensley for 32 years. She has witnessed every form of abuse, neglect, and lies parents tell about their kids. When she saw a teenage girl in the rain without a coat, phone, or searchers, she knew what she saw. She wouldn't tolerate it. My father thought he solved a problem that night. Thought he was cleaning house, removing the rotten apples, and protecting his family from a sick daughter who didn't deserve his affection. His real action was lighting a fuse. He had no idea what would explode. Before we continue, if you like the story, please subscribe, and tell me where and when you're watching. I see everything. Many thanks for your help. To understand what happened that night and why my sister did what she did, let's go back to when everything fell apart. I lost my mother Margaret in 2008. Cancer. I am 12 years old. Madison was 16. Our mom baked pancakes on Sundays, and braided my hair for school portraits. The next day, we stood by a hospital bed watching machines beep slowly until they stopped. My dad handled it poorly. To put it mildly. He collapsed like a dying star. Back from work, he sat in his recliner and stared at nothing. The house could have burned around him, and he could not have noticed. Madison rose to the occasion. At 16, she cooked dinner, wrote permission forms, and made sure I went to school on time. She became responsible, mature, and my father's dependable daughter, and he complimented her repeatedly. Madison, what would I do without you? Madison, you're mature. Madison, you keep this family together. He probably never questioned how she was managing our mother's loss. He expected her to manage everything else. My father had 2 blind spots. He liked his recliner and oldest daughter. He didn't realize they were worn out and coming apart, but they needed to be replaced. Men reclined. I swear, my father refused to see what happened while he wasn't looking. Madison went beyond stepping up. She built a kingdom. In her realm, I was the peasant she had to subdue. Started tiny. Mystery homework that vanished the night before. Field trip permission slips that never reached my teachers. My favorite clothing shrank in the wash. Another, then another. Oops. Must have been an accident. I sent my buddies' birthday party invitations, but they never arrived. Lost classmate messages. A reputation developed without my knowledge. She'd go to my instructors with a sad, worried face, and tell them I was struggling after our mother's death, acting out at home, and that they should be patient with me. She portrayed a disturbed youngster, and everyone believed her, since she was mature, responsible, and kind. I once sat my father down and told him Madison was sabotaging me, lying about me to everyone, and something was very wrong. He looked at me like I was insane. He answered, "You're just jealous of your sister. She wants to aid this family. You should be grateful." I stopped talking after that. Stay small. Stay silent. Survive till I could escape. 2 years after my mother died, my father remarried. Denise was first polite. She laughed often, created casseroles, and tried hard to join our family. Madison instantly called her parents. I suppose it was purposeful to establish her status as the nice, devoted daughter. I couldn't. When my own mother had been gone for 2 years, I couldn't call this stranger mom. Not about Denise. My heart wasn't ready. But my silent rebellion cost me. Denise made me feel like an outsider in my own home after that. She and Madison started a club without me. At 16, the lines were apparent. Madison was the favored, golden child who could do no wrong. I was the problematic daughter who couldn't get it together. Money came next. Before her death, my mother established trust funds for us, $52,000 each, available at 18. There was no riches, but it was something. A backup plan from a mother who knew she wouldn't be around to help us become adults. Madison, 18, received her share immediately in 2010. Within 10 months, it was gone. She has a sports car, fancy clothes, expensive gifts for Trevor, a smooth-talking, big ideas boyfriend, and no income. Madison was broke when I left 2 years later. Her trust fund was a distant memory, and Trevor was always talking about his next big investment scheme, the one that would make them rich. My $52,000 was untouchable until 2014, when I turned 18, unless something happened to me first. See, my mother's trust had a clause she presumably felt would safeguard us. If either daughter was legally incompetent or institutionalized before 22, a court-appointed family guardian would handle her share until she recovered. Madison and Trevor understood. If my father found drugs, cash, and drug dealing proof in my room and I was committed for substance misuse, someone would have to manage my trust fund. Someone reliable, like a caring elder sister who wanted the best for me. $52,000. Madison valued me that way. So she priced her sister. She began her plot the week before she destroyed my life. My father's ATM card withdrawals of small amounts. She knew his PIN because she managed household money. Saved Trevor's empty medication bottles. Prepaid burner phone from a convenience store with bogus texts. Madison entered my room on October 22nd and planted everything as I ate breakfast and thought about my math test. Cash in my dresser drawer, pills in my closet, and a burner phone number paper as proof of drug dealer contact. She then told our father his youngest daughter had a dreadful secret with tears in her eyes. Each word was believed. Why not? Madison was a perfect, responsible, and truthful daughter for 9 years. I was depicted as the disturbed one for 9 years before I saw the image. My trial ended when I entered the front door after school. The conviction was guilty, and exile followed. That got me on Route 11 inches October rain, walking toward my grandmother's house like it was the only light. However, Madison had made one minor blunder in her immaculate plan. She forgot Diane Hensley. My only memory of collapsing was gravel cutting my palms, and then nothing, like someone turning off a TV mid-story. Waking up is what I recall. Fluorescent lights, antiseptic and industrial floor cleaner fragrance, scratchy hospital blanket wrapped over me like I was vulnerable and worth preserving. I hadn't felt that in years. A woman sat by my bed. She had silver hair in a bun, reading glasses on her nose, and a paperback novel in her lap. She looked like a granny who baked cookies and carried Kleenex. Her keen eyes recorded everything they saw. She was Diane Hensley. She retired at 64, from Child Protective Services after 32 years. She has witnessed every form of child abuse, neglect, and cruelty, directed by adults. On a cool October night, her headlights caught something by the roadside on her way home from a book group. Teenage girl unconscious, drenched, alone. Diane's tires squealed as she stopped. Her trunk held an emergency blanket. She wrapped me like a burrito while calling 911, a CPS practice. She waited with me for the paramedics. She followed the ambulance to the hospital and was there when I woke up 5 hours later. That woman may have rescued me. She discovered me before the hypothermia finished, but she was the right person at the right time. She gave me coffee when I woke up. Cafeteria, hospital coffee, at 200 degrees, it tastes like regret. This is awful, she remarked. The weather is warm. A laugh. He chuckled, and she smiled for the first time in hours or days. Her knowing, kind smile told me she understood more than I thought. There she is, she said. Please explain why a 16-year-old was strolling alone on Route 11 inches a storm without a coat or phone. I told her everything. The charges, fabricated proof, and Madison's years of manipulation. I told her things no one had heard before, since no one had listened. Diane sat, nodding occasionally, never interrupting or doubting. She was silent when I finished. She said, I believe you, and I'm going to help you prove it. Those 7 words changed my life. I was unconscious when things happened. The hospital called police after finding a youngster in danger. The police searched for my relative. My father had to be called. I wanted to see his face when Officer Brooks broke the news. It went like this, apparently. Your 16-year-old daughter was found unconscious on Route 11, Mr. Callahan. She claims you forbade her from your home tonight during a storm. Hypothermia. The county general has her. You must enter. Child Protective Services was notified, sir. A caseworker is present. Show your proof. Around 10:40 that night, my father and Madison arrived at the hospital. Now awake, I sat in my hospital bed with Diane. CPS caseworker Sofia Alvarez and a uniformed police officer were present. Not the welcome committee my father expected. He seemed frightened, not guilty quite yet. I was furious and puzzled, like this was a major hassle. Madison was behind him, and I noticed her nervous for the first time. The smirk she had as I left was gone. They expected a fearful, sorry girl to confess her misdeeds and beg to return home. Instead, they discovered a room full of professionals asking tough questions about why a youngster was traveling alone in adverse conditions without communication or protection. Madison sensed the power shift. She tried her script. Worried elder sister, younger sibling. The best for her is our goal. But Sofia Alvarez didn't agree. Madison was activating every alert on her deception radar after 27 years of social work. Next came my granny. Eleanor Reeves. 70. 5'1". Was determined and not in the mood for bullshit. As her only daughter and granddaughter. My mother never trusted my father or his new family. She lived 45 minutes from the hospital. At 28. She arrived. I heard her before I saw her, that click of sensible heels moving quickly down the hallway. She stormed into my room like a silver-haired hurricane and put herself between me and my father. That's my granddaughter, she told everyone. What did this fool do? My father explained, justified, and discussed the stealing, drugs, and evidence. Eleanor held up one hand after 20 seconds of listening. She added, Richard, I've known you for 16 years, and you've never been bright, but this could be your dumbest moment. You threw a child into a storm because? Suddenly pills. Suddenly available cash. Did you inquire about her side? He opened, closed, and reopened his mouth. Eleanor nodded. That was my thought. One thing about my grandmother. She defended me as well as loved me. I was fatigued and hypothermic in a hospital bed when Eleanor Reeves went to war that night. An emergency custody hearing was requested. Right then. It was nearly midnight. But she didn't care. She contacted a family court judge who owed her. Eleanor got him on the phone after 16 years on the PTA with his wife. The hospital social worker gave details. A little child thrown into bad weather. No pre-expulsion investigation. Not verifying accusations. A child with early-stage hypothermia is unconscious. No professional evaluated the father's evidence. My new home was by 110 a.m. Emergency temporary guardianship was given to Eleanor Reeves immediately. My father was told to stay away from me until the investigation was complete. CPS would interview me, Madison, my father, Denise, and closely examine that evidence. My father tried again as we left the hospital. He grabbed me and spoke. Eleanor moved between us without stopping. You cannot touch her, she said. You cannot speak to her. You blew your chance to be her father. It was thrown into a storm. We're leaving. We went to her ancient Buick, which she had driven since before I was born, and she assisted me into the passenger seat and wrapped me in another blanket, even though the car heater was on full blast. I gazed at her while crying. I have no clean clothes, Grandma. I have nothing. Her eyes were ferocious and tender as she patted my hand. I have a Target card, honey. Tomorrow we shop. Tonight, you eat soup and sleep in a bed nobody will ever throw out. My new life began that night. Grandma Eleanor's house has 4 rules. Breakfast at 8, homework before TV, and no nonsense before her second coffee. Though small and unassuming, it was warm, cozy, and full of love. I breathed for the first time in years. But the tale continued. Not even close. The CPS investigator called my grandmother 12 days later. You might want to sit down, Mrs. Reeves, Sofia Alvarez remarked. We examined Mr. Callahan's evidence. Madison didn't know her ideal plan was about to fail, and we obtained security footage that contradicts the timing. The investigation altered everything. Sofia Alvarez went beyond box checking. She was a cardigan detective. She tracked evidence, not simply examined it. Every receipt, timestamp, thread. Madison's ideal story disintegrated as she pulled. It started with money. $950 was in my dresser drawer. My father said it proved I stole from him for months. Clear cut. Right? Except Sofia Alvarez investigated bank records. My $950 came from a single ATM withdrawal on October 22, the day I was expelled. The bank gave machine surveillance film. Afternoon 3:06. It wasn't me on camera. It was Madison. Clear as day. A jacket she wore that morning. Same ponytail. Same background automobile. Her white vehicle with the bumper dent from backing into a mailbox last summer. A note on alibis. My hair was airtight. At 3:06 p.m., I was studying molecular bonds in 5th period chemistry on October 22. The school attendance system showed me a present till 3:30. My teacher recalled my covalent electron question. I couldn't withdraw that. Physically impossible. I was in a classroom 11 miles away with 28 witnesses and an electronic check-in. Madison felt she was smart. Criminal masterminds have this drawback. You must be smart. She used our father's ATM card without considering bank cameras. She withdrew in the afternoon without checking my alibi. On camera, she bought the burner phone at a convenience store 2 blocks from her gym in her yoga pants with her car in the parking lot. Certain masterminds wear capes. Madison wore Lululemon and got caught because she couldn't drive 12 minutes more. Pills followed. The bottles in my closet were from Trevor Barlow's prescription. Madison's lover, the idea man with no job. Doctor prescribed anxiety medicine filled at Oak Street drugstore. Sofia Alvarez contacted that pharmacy. Found anything intriguing. Trevor reported the tablets missing and filed a police report, stating someone entered into his car and stole them. Worried about citizen conduct. He filed that report 4 days after I was expelled, on October 26. Why did Trevor wait 4 days to report the pill theft if it was stolen and placed in my room on October 22? The solution was clear. Since they weren't stolen. He planted them with Madison's permission and reported them lost to conceal their tracks and acquire a refill. The delayed theft report was like a neon sign saying, "We planned this." If this story hits home, stay tuned because what occurs next is worth every second. Please like it if you support me. The planet matters. Burner phone was the true evidence. A convenience store-bought prepaid phone from October 12, 10 days before everything went down, sent bogus drug dealer texts. Sofia Alvarez found the store and requested security footage. A young woman with brown hair and a ponytail and athletic build paid cash, but her car was visible through the window, white automobile with bumper dent. The same automobile, woman, and breadcrumbs led back to my sister. As the investigation progressed, the picture got worse. Sofia Alvarez investigated my father's account checks from the past 2 years. Her discovery made $950 seem like pennies. My father's checks were forged for over 2 years. Starting little, 50 here, 100 there, they added up. The signatures were close but off. Trevor Barlow's business accounts received the funds. A little under $21,500 was stolen. Madison did more than frame me. After years of robbing our father blind, she needed me gone before anyone noticed. Eleanor, my grandma, wouldn't tolerate this. She hired Daniel Vance, a 30-year family law veteran and family friend. He knew my mother, Margaret, since grade school. Eleanor recounted what happened, and his countenance hardened, making me glad he was on my side. Daniel applied for permanent guardianship immediately. He sued Madison for fraud, mental distress, and everything else he could get, and he enhanced my trust fund protection so no one could touch it until I turned 18. That year taught me something I still use. Record everything. Record all receipts, messages, and promises. My grandmother stored all her critical documents in a folder. Letters, taxes, warranties, bills. She called it paper insurance. After everything, I repeated it. When I was 16, I bought my first filing cabinet. Keep and use it. Some habits are life-saving. Living with Grandma Eleanor was like breathing again after years of holding my breath. Her residence wasn't big or fancy. They had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that smelled like coffee and cinnamon, but it was warm, safe, and nobody was scheming against me. She put me at a new school where no one understood my history. This was my first meaningful friendship. People that liked me for myself, not because they were told who I was. I eventually processed years of manipulation without realizing it by seeing a counselor. Grandma Eleanor had few rules, but one was stringent. Dinner at 6. No exclusions. Chaos can wait till after meatloaf, she added. It was the best advice ever. My father's world was falling apart. The CPS probed the entire Callahan family. Richard was repeatedly questioned, becoming fatigued and bewildered. How had he missed so much? How had he been blind? Denise slept in the guest room. Their conversations grew hostile and full of accusations they didn't want to voice. Madison was enraged, never remorseful, only made her plan fail. She blamed others. Biased CPS investigator. The bank footage was misled. Trevor's prescriptions were misread. She couldn't take the golden child's crown sliding. Daniel Vance spent months making a solid case. Bank records. Surveillance footage. Medication records. Phone receipts. He took testimony from Diane Hensley, my instructors, and neighbors who saw Madison's automobile at unusual hours. Madison's former acquaintances spoke forward. Over the years, she burned many bridges, and people were pleased to talk about her falsehoods, manipulation, and casual brutality. Court was scheduled for April 2012. A month before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Nevada arrested Trevor Barlow. Federal marshals arrested him for running the same investment scam in 3 states. He stole about $520,000 from victims' funds. Federal accusations might have landed him in prison for 17 years. His lawyer called the next day. Trevor was ready to negotiate and reveal the truth about everything, even his girlfriend Madison and what she did to her little sister. Madison had nowhere to run as the walls closed in. Trev Barlow was several things. A scam artist, liar, and man who lived off others' trust and money. He wasn't loyal. He sang like a record deal canary when federal prosecutors offered him a reduced sentence for cooperation. His statement was 14 pages. He verified everything. Madison always intended to frame me. She stole from our father for about 2 years, giving Trevor money for his investments. When she discovered her theft was tougher to disguise, she sought a scapegoat. That scapegoat was me. Madison considered me the ideal prey. The problematic younger sister who never fit in and nobody believed. She advised Trevor to institutionalize me to tackle 2 issues. Someone would be responsible for the money. My guardian would have access to my trust fund, $52,000. She wanted to steal something from me while I was drugged, discredited, and alone in a facility. Trevor documented everything: planning sessions, pill bottles he provided, Madison's burner phone, the morning she put evidence in my room. He included their pre-October 22 text messages. This wasn't impulsive. It was planned and frigid. I remembered his last line. Madison said her sister was a coward who wouldn't fight. She aired. April 2012. Family court. I lived with Grandma Eleanor for 6 months. I'd acquired a healthy weight. The sort from eating and sleeping. I made an honor roll at my new school. I was remembering being a typical adolescent. But entering that courtroom made me feel 16 again, afraid and little, and wondering whether anybody would believe me. Grandmother Eleanor grabbed my hand. Dan Vance nodded reassuringly, and Diane Hensley was sitting in the gallery with the same reading glasses and stern attitude as the night she found me. Simple guardianship, making Eleanor's temporary custody permanent, and support requirements were the hearing's topics. It grew much bigger. The district attorney intervened. Trevor's confession and Sofia Alvarez's mound of evidence made this something more than a family court case. Criminal charges were pending. Madison sat across the courtroom from a public defender she met an hour earlier. She was paler and smaller. The confident, golden child who had run our household for a decade looked like a fearful young woman whose lies had caught up with her. Our father sat alone in the gallery. Denise declined the invitation. He appeared to be 12 years older in 6 months. Systematically, professionally, devastating proof was presented. ATM footage of Madison withdrawing at 3:06 p.m. School attendance records show I was in chemistry class then. The pharmacy records indicate Trevor's neatly delayed theft report. Security footage from the convenience store shows Madison buying the burner phone, $21,500 in fraudulent checks over 2 years. Trevor confessed. Read the record word for word. Madison tried to keep her tail straight, appearing puzzled, naive, and concerned about her troublesome sister when she testified. The prosecutor snapped. Miss. She showed the ATM photo to Callahan. Is this you at First National Bank at 3:06 p.m.? On October 22nd? Madison swallowed. She viewed herself as clear as day. I was getting grocery money. Groceries? The prosecutor nodded slowly. $950 cash for groceries. You didn't tell your father about this withdrawal when you accused your sister of taking that amount later that day. Silence. Where this ATM is? 11 miles from your sister's school. Her attendance records say she was at school until 3:30 p.m. How could she have left chemistry class? More silence. Madison's public defender objected, but there was no issue. Evidence was evidence. Facts ignored her feelings. They rang Denise. My stepmother seemed to want to be somewhere else. She had remained silent and indifferent for years. She was under oath in court. It was no longer possible to remain silent. She was asked about October 22nd morning by the prosecutor. Did she notice anything odd? Denise scarcely spoke. Around 7:20 a.m., Madison entered Claire's room. A hair tie was borrowed. Did she exit with a hair tie? She was empty-handed. Anything else in the days before the incident? Denise closed her eyes. She appeared to be preparing for impact. Madison was on the phone with Trevor 2 days prior. She said, "Everything is in place." She chuckled. The court was silent. When they called our father to testify, I nearly felt terrible for him. He had to explain why he threw his 6-year-old daughter into a storm without investigating the allegations. He admitted to not checking bank records. Never wondered why Madison found this proof abruptly. Never requested my explanation. His voice broke when he said, "I trusted her. My firstborn. She was always accountable." I believed he couldn't finish. Judge Lorraine Morrison served 28 years. She had witnessed ugly custody battles, harsh divorces, and families torn apart by lies, money, and pride. She was probably disturbed by what she heard. She slashed the courtroom with her remarks. "Mr. Callahan, trust does not justify negligence. Unverified claims caused you to expel a minor into dangerous weather. You didn't explore. You picked one daughter above another without proof, justification, or parental judgment. That's not parenting. Yes, abandonment." As she continued, my father sat gray-faced. "Your older daughter planned to kill her sister. She cheated, deceived, and tricked you into her brutality. You indulged her because it was easier to believe the daughter who made you feel wonderful than to parent the daughter who needed you." Madison received a harsh penalty: fraud, theft, lying to police, child endangerment. Her public defender struck a plea deal to avoid trial. 3 years suspended sentence. 6 years of supervised probation. 240 hours of community service. Complete repayment of all stolen funds. $21,500 from our father, and $950 she planned to deframe me. The judge granted a permanent restraining order. Madison could not reach me directly or indirectly. She would go to jail if she came within 600 feet of me. This part would follow her forever. Her felony conviction is permanent. Avoid finance, money, trust, and working with children or vulnerable persons. The golden child scarlet letter wouldn't come off. My father lost guardianship forever. He had to pay for my rehabilitation and education until I became 22. He was also ordered to start a college fund with reparations. The community learned everything. Small towns chat. In weeks, everyone knew what Richard Callahan did to his younger daughter. Friends stopped calling. Nearby residents ignored me. His church group started scheduling conflicts when he tried to attend. Denise divorced 8 weeks later. She realized she had contributed to my pain and couldn't tolerate seeing her spouse reminding her of it. The judge turned to me at the conclusion. "Miss Callahan," she added, "you've shown remarkable resilience in the face of extraordinary cruelty. The court gives Eleanor Reeves, your grandma, permanent custody. Your trust fund is safe until 18. I hope your future is better than your past." I wanted to say something creative and memorable. I wanted to say, "Your Honor, watch me parallel park. That's the ultimate test of character, but some jokes are for yourself." That moment was too great for humor. I said, "Thank you." My father tried to approach me one last time as we left the courthouse. He began, "Sweetheart." Grandma Eleanor stepped between us without stopping. Her voice froze. "No more calling her that. You lost that when you flung her into a storm." I continued walking. Not looking back. The sun shone that day. April, in our region, is unpredictable. However, that afternoon was sunny and promising. My grandmother loved me, my lawyer battled for me, my caseworker, and a retired CPS supervisor believed me when no one else would. Finally, I had a future. Some stories continue beyond court. Some stories have additional chapters. A letter arrived 14 years later. October 2026. I'm 30 and my life is nothing like I expected at 16. Walking through a storm with a school backpack and damp sneakers. I live in Boston. Beautiful Harborview apartment, morning window light. It was my choice. Tech firm marketing director. Good pay, perks, and people. I rose from an internship, and each advancement seemed like a departure from my past. Currently engaged. His name is Liam. You can tell a lot about his heart from his pediatric nursing career. We met at a charity event 2 years ago. Work brought me there. He cared and was there. After spilling wine over my dress, he apologized for 12 minutes and made me laugh so hard I forgot to be annoyed. We marry in spring. Life's good. Life is amazing. Then came the letter. It arrived at my grandmother's. Still smart at 84, Eleanor remains in the same house and follows her 4 rules. Breakfast at 8, homework before TV, no bullshit before coffee. Some things never change. She called to tell me something important had come. She spoke carefully and neutrally, as if to avoid influencing my decisions. I drove down the weekend. Cheap white envelope with weak lettering. I hardly recognized. I was returned to Maple Grove Care Center, a nursing facility an hour from home. I opened it at Eleanor's kitchen table with a chilling cup of coffee. Dear Claire, it started. I know my requests are unworthy. You have every reason to discard this letter without reading it. I'm asking nonetheless since I'm running out of time and need to say this. I'm in Maple Grove. My stroke was 3 years ago. Less effective left side. Long gone, Denise. Transferred half her assets to Florida with an internet accountant. Sale of house. The life I thought I had is gone. Madison visited me last week. I barred her from the room. Can't look at her. I remember what I did due to her lies whenever I hear her voice. The only one I want to see and apologize to is you. I failed you as your father in the worst way. I trusted falsehoods. I chose comfort over justice. I discarded you like garbage. You owe me nothing. If you can find it in your heart to come once, I'd like to apologize in person before it's too late. Your dad, Richard. I sat there for a while. The coffee cooled. Afternoon light crossed the table. Eleanor remained silent. As usual, she waited and let me find my way. 14 years of solitude. Making a life without him. Did I owe him? I didn't. But my mother sprang to mind. I considered the person Mom raised me to be before her death. I considered ending cycles. I went. For me, not him. Expectations were met at the nursing facility. Fluorescent lighting, industrial floors, disinfectant masking endings aroma. My father's room was small. One bed, one window, a wall-mounted TV playing something nobody was watching. Despite being 75, he looked 20 years older. He could have passed for 90. He looked crumpled, colorless, and little after the stroke, which had taken something fundamental from him. He cried as I entered. Not speaking for the first few minutes, he sat with tears in his eyes while I stood by the door, wondering if I'd made a mistake. He found his voice eventually. He apologized repeatedly, stumbling over words because the stroke had also robbed his language. He admitted to being blind, dumb, and harsh. He called losing me his worst mistake. He recalled that October night daily. Every night, when it rained, I let him continue. Didn't interrupt or soothe him. I said what I came to say. I pardon you. His face shriveled in relief. But please grasp that. I sat on a chair near his bed. Made sure he saw me. I forgive without forgetting. It indicates I'm letting go of this rage. It weighs me down, and I'm done allowing you in. I was tossed into a maelstrom because you believed a lie. Convincing evidence made you doubt it. You trusted it because it was simpler. Madison boosted your self-esteem, so I reminded you of everything you lost when Mom died. You picked comfort over your daughter. I built my life without you. I self-financed college. Built a career. My groom would never throw me out in a rain, never alone a hurricane. My happiness, but you must accept your actions. I no longer shoulder that load. You own it. He nodded, still crying. He probably ran out of words. I know. He succeeded. I know. Just wanted you to know I apologize. I needed one last look. I stayed for 25 minutes. We chatted a little. More to say? I informed him about my job, apartment, Liam, surface, and safe things. He listened as if it were his most important talk. As I left, he reached out with his good hand without grabbing. I let him touch my fingers, then left. A nurse stopped me in the corridor. Groceries? The prosecutor nodded slowly. $950 cash for groceries. You didn't tell your father about this withdrawal when you accused your sister of taking that amount later that day. Silence. Where this ATM is? 11 miles from your sister's school. Her attendance records say she was at school until 3:30 p.m. How could she have left chemistry class? More silence. Madison's public defender objected, but there was no issue. Evidence was evidence. Facts ignored her feelings. They rang Denise. My stepmother seemed to want to be somewhere else. She had remained silent and indifferent for years. She was under oath in court. It was no longer possible to remain silent. She was asked about October 22 morning by the prosecutor. Did she notice anything odd? Denise scarcely spoke. Around 7:20 a.m. Madison entered Claire's room. A hair tie was borrowed. Did she exit with a hair tie? She was empty-handed. Anything else in the days before the incident? Denise closed her eyes. She appeared to be preparing for impact. Madison was on the phone with Trevor 2 days prior. She said, "Everything is in place." She chuckled. The court was silent. When they called our father to testify, I nearly felt terrible for him. He had to explain why he threw his 16-year-old daughter into a storm without investigating the allegations. He admitted to not checking bank records. Never wondered why Madison found this proof abruptly. Never requested my explanation. His voice broke when he said, "I trusted her. My firstborn. She was always accountable." I believed he couldn't finish. Judge Lorraine Morrison served 28 years. She had witnessed ugly custody battles, harsh divorces, and families torn apart by lies, money, and pride. She was probably disturbed by what she heard. She slashed the courtroom with her remarks. "Mr. Callahan, trust does not justify negligence. Unverified claims caused you to expel a minor into dangerous weather. You didn't explore. You picked one daughter above another without proof, justification, or parental judgment. That's not parenting. Yes, abandonment." As she continued, my father sat gray-faced. "Your older daughter planned to kill her sister. She cheated, deceived, and tricked you into her brutality. You indulged her because it was easier to believe the daughter who made you feel wonderful than to parent the daughter who needed you." Madison received a harsh penalty. Fraud. Theft. Lying to police. Child endangerment. Her public defender struck a plea deal to avoid trial. 3 years suspended sentence. 6 years of supervised probation. 240 hours of community service. Complete repayment of all stolen funds. $21,500 from our father, and $950 she planned to frame me. The judge granted a permanent restraining order. Madison could not reach me directly or indirectly. She would go to jail if she came within 600 feet of me. This part would follow her forever. Her felony conviction is permanent. Avoid finance, money, trust, and working with children or vulnerable persons. The golden child's scarlet letter wouldn't come off. My father lost guardianship forever. He had to pay for my rehabilitation and education until I became 22. He was also ordered to start a college fund with reparations. The community learned everything. Small towns chat. In weeks, everyone knew what Richard Callahan did to his younger daughter. Friends stopped calling. Nearby residents ignored me. His church group started scheduling conflicts when he tried to attend. Denise divorced 8 weeks later. She realized she had contributed to my pain and couldn't tolerate seeing her spouse reminding her of it. The judge turned to me at the conclusion. "Miss Callahan," she added, "you've shown remarkable resilience in the face of extraordinary cruelty. The court gives Eleanor Reeves, your grandma, permanent custody. Your trust fund is safe until 18. I hope your future is better than your past." I wanted to say something creative and memorable. I wanted to say, "Your Honor, watch me parallel park. That's the ultimate test of character, but some jokes are for yourself." That moment was too great for humor. I said, Thank you. My father tried to approach me one last time as we left the courthouse. He began, "Sweetheart." Grandma Eleanor stepped between us without stopping. Her voice froze. "No more calling her that. You lost that when you flung her into a storm." I continued walking, not looking back. The sun shone that day. April in our region is unpredictable. However, that afternoon was sunny and promising. My grandmother loved me, my lawyer battled for me, my caseworker, and a retired CPS supervisor believed me when no one else would. Finally, I had a future. Some stories continue beyond court. Some stories have additional chapters. A letter arrived 14 years later. October 2026. I'm 30 and my life is nothing like I expected at 16. Walking through a storm with a school backpack and damp sneakers. I live in Boston. Beautiful Harborview apartment. Morning window light. It was my choice. Tech firm marketing director. Good pay, perks, and people. I rose from an internship, and each advancement seemed like a departure from my past. Currently engaged. His name is Liam. You can tell a lot about his heart from his pediatric nursing career. We met at a charity event 2 years ago. Work brought me there. He cared and was there. After spilling wine over my dress, he apologized for 12 minutes and made me laugh so hard I forgot to be annoyed. We marry in spring. Life's good. Life is amazing. Then came the letter. It arrived at my grandmother's. Still smart at 84, Eleanor remains in the same house and follows her 4 rules. Breakfast at 8, homework before TV, no bullshit before coffee. Some things never change. She called to tell me something important had come. She spoke carefully and neutrally, as if to avoid influencing my decisions. I drove down the weekend. Cheap white envelope with weak lettering. I hardly recognized. I was returned to Maple Grove Care Center, a nursing facility an hour from home. I opened it at Eleanor's kitchen table with a chilling cup of coffee. Dear Claire. It started. I know my requests are unworthy. You have every reason to discard this letter without reading it. I'm asking nonetheless since I'm running out of time and need to say this. I'm in Maple Grove. My stroke was 3 years ago. Less effective left side. Long gone Denise. Transferred half her assets to Florida with an internet accountant. Sale of house. The life I thought I had is gone. Madison visited me last week. I barred her from the room. Can't look at her. I remember what I did do to her lies whenever I hear her voice. The only one I want to see and apologize to is you. I failed you as your father in the worst way. I trusted falsehoods. I chose comfort over justice. I discarded you like garbage. You owe me nothing. If you can find it in your heart to come once, I'd like to apologize in person before it's too late. Your dad, Richard. I sat there for a while. The coffee cooled. Afternoon light crossed the table. Eleanor remained silent. As usual, she waited and let me find my way. 14 years of solitude, making a life without him. Did I owe him? I didn't. But my mother sprang to mind. I considered the person Mom raised me to be before her death. I considered ending cycles. I went. For me. Not him. Expectations were met at the nursing facility. Fluorescent lighting, industrial floors. Disinfectant masking endings, aroma. My father's room was small. 1 bed, 1 window, a wall-mounted TV playing something nobody was watching. Despite being 75, he looked 20 years older. He could have passed for 90. He looked crumpled, colorless, and little after the stroke, which had taken something fundamental from him. He cried as I entered. Not speaking for the first few minutes, he sat with tears in his eyes while I stood by the door, wondering if I'd made a mistake. He found his voice eventually. He apologized repeatedly, stumbling over words because the stroke had also robbed his language. He admitted to being blind, dumb, and harsh. He called losing me his worst mistake. He recalled that October night daily. Every night, when it rained, I let him continue. Didn't interrupt or soothe him. I said what I came to say. I pardon you. His face shriveled in relief. But please grasp that. I sat on a chair near his bed. Made sure he saw me. I forgive without forgetting. It indicates I'm letting go of this rage. It weighs me down, and I'm done allowing you in. I was tossed into a maelstrom because you believed a lie. Convincing evidence made you doubt it. You trusted it because it was simpler. Madison boosted your self-esteem. You So I reminded you of everything you lost when mom died. You picked comfort over your daughter. I built my life without you. I self-financed college. Built a career. My groom would never throw me out in a rain, never alone a hurricane. My happiness, but you must accept your actions. I no longer shoulder that load. You own it. He nodded. Still crying. He probably ran out of words. I know. He succeeded. I know. Just wanted you to know I apologize. I needed one last look. I stayed for 25 minutes. We chatted a little. More to say? I informed him about my job, apartment, Liam, surface, and safe things. He listened as if it were his most important talk. As I left, he reached out with his good hand without grabbing. I let him touch my fingers, then left. A nurse stopped me in the corridor. You're his daughter? I nodded. She looked at me and then at his chamber. Your sister visited last week. I stood still as he refused to see her and urged us to send her away. He ignored her. Shaking her head, the nurse said he could only apologize to one daughter, not her. It genuinely upset him. Said he couldn't look at her face without picturing her deeds. Not sure what to say. After years of being the rejected, throwaway daughter, and unworthy, my father finally dismissed Madison, the golden kid, the favorite, and the one he trusted. Too late to matter or heal. Something changed in my chest. Different from forgiveness. I gave that. More like finishing, like flipping the last page of a long book. I left the nursing facility in October light. Weather and life change in the same month. 14 years ago. October brought rain, betrayal, and hypothermia. October brings pumpkin spice and falling leaves. I'm basic. Don't care. My real life start anniversary. Some storms redirect, not destroy. 14 years ago, I lost a house but discovered my home that October night. A father didn't deserve me, but a grandmother did. I found myself after losing a sibling who never loved me. When I returned to Boston, Liam was waiting, countertop takeout containers. A bad movie was on TV. His calm expression when he realizes I need time to think. How did it go? He asked. My keys fell on the table and I leaned against him. I think I'm finally done, I said. I think I can let it go now. He hugged me without asking more. The Liam thing. He knows when to push and when to relax. One of 1,000 reasons I'm marrying him. My grandmother will host our wedding next spring. Simple ceremony. Close friends. Wonderful food. Eleanor began food planning. The list includes meatloaf. Madison works nights and wonders where her life went wrong. With regrets, my father is in a nursing home alone. Denise lives in Florida, pretending we never existed. But I'm in Boston. I have a career, a loving partner, and a grandmother who will probably outlive us all due to stubbornness. I finally framed the band poster. The one I bought with my stipend the week before it broke. I saw it online years ago. Too much money spent. I hung it in my office for daily viewing. Some things are worth waiting for. Many thanks for viewing. Your screen already shows more of my fascinating stories. Click now to avoid missing the finest part. You'll love it. See you next time. My brother emptied every account in 3 hours. Then my one-year-old said, Mom, don't worry. I handled it. Natalie Parker is my name. I work as a cybersecurity analyst in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm 38 years old. And 3 hours ago, I saw all of my cents disappear in real time from my accounts. As I finished a late-night report at the kitchen table, a series of push notifications exploded across my phone. My laptop's blue light bounces off the empty cereal bowls in the sink. I initially believed it to be a glitch. Then I opened my banking app and saw the entire amount of my emergency fund, savings, checking account, and even the small college nest egg I had started years ago. It had been drained and moved out using a device I knew. The same brother I once rescued from eviction is one of my brothers. When he just needed a little assistance getting back on his feet, I trusted him enough to leave him on as an authorized user. He had not simply borrowed money. My life had been cleansed by him. My heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed to be reverberating off the walls as I gazed at the screen. The rent has been paid. The tuition has been paid. Each restless overtime shift. All of my freelance jobs after my daughter's bedtime. Everything. Someone who was aware of how much I relied on that money tapped me several times before leaving. I refrained from crying. I went cold. As if I were auditing someone else's breach rather than experiencing my own, my thoughts immediately shifted to threat models and attack surfaces. Did he figure out what my password was? Have you used an outdated token? It was there when I looked at the device list. I never thought he would use his cheap Android phone against me, so it was still linked. I felt sick to my stomach. Was I the fool who thought that the rules I enforced for everyone else would not apply to family? A chair scraped behind me. My 1-year-old daughter rubbed her eyes and patted her socked feet. She glanced at my face for a moment before turning to the screen that was illuminated with red warnings and negative balances. She simply stared for a moment as if she were performing a calculation that only she could comprehend. Then she said, "Mom, don't worry," and squared her shoulders with a tiny fierce certainty that did not match her unicorn pajamas. My brain shorted out. I handled it. In the midst of such a financial ambush. What could an 1-year-old have managed? Tell me what time it is where you are and where you are watching from before I tell you what she actually did and what my brother yelled on the phone 3 days later. I want to see how far the betrayal of one family can go. I felt my mom brain and my professional brain clash as soon as she finished speaking. When an intern in the SOC at work says, "Don't worry, I fixed it," my first reaction is to find out what they just broke. All I wanted to do at home, staring at my daughter's little, solemn face, was shield her from the mess her uncle had left behind. "You handled it?" "What do you mean?" I asked in the most composed manner possible. Snorts. She climbed up on the chair next to me and swung her legs as if it were any other night and not the moment our lives had been cut off financially. "Do you recall introducing me to the banking app?" I said. She said, "You told me to click this little flag thing and let you know right away if anything looked strange." With a confidence befitting someone twice her age, she reached for my phone. "I saw a text from the bank regarding a new login while I was playing that puzzle game on your phone earlier." I opened the app because it sounded suspicious. Like a video game, the numbers were moving. "Mom." I reported the device after pressing the emergency freeze button. I gasped. I hadn't even noticed the small banner at the top of the app because I was so scared. A temporary hold was put in place. The suspicious activity is being examined. The room tilted momentarily. "Did you put the accounts on hold?" "Yes," she said, sounding almost insulted. I had to inquire. "I recalled your statement regarding cybercriminals. You told me not to be polite if something didn't feel right. Press the red button." I did, then. A final transfer that had been started but not yet cleared was sitting in limbo on the transaction list. My brother had nearly escaped punishment for everything. Nearly. On his fingers, my daughter had slammed the digital door. Shame smashed into relief. Companies paid me to secure entire infrastructures because I was the expert. However, my 1-year-old was the one who acted quickly enough to prevent more damage. "How were you aware that the login belonged to him?" I inquired. As if she had been anticipating the question, she took out her own tablet from beneath her hoodie. She said, "Because of Find My." "Remember how you, snorts, forced me to tell you where I was? On our trip to the amusement park, you also told me about yours and your uncle's. You never turned his off." I looked at the map when the bank message appeared, and his dot was blinking from a motel outside of Charlotte. She shrugged as if basic geolocation sleuthing was homework because you weren't present. I assumed someone was acting inappropriately. My rage turned from untamed and aimless to a bright, sharp line at that moment. Not only had my brother betrayed my confidence, he had done it knowing that I was responsible for a child. He had fronted me money for a security deposit, and had used access I had granted him years prior when I was in debt. It felt thankful at the time to add him as an authorized user on a single account. After I stabilized, I never took him off. It was evidence that family members supported one another. I told myself, that choice had now become a loaded gun that I had given to him. Chloe, my daughter, put her knees up on the chair. "Will we be all right?" She muttered. "Mom, things don't matter to me. I just wonder if we'll need to relocate." The inquiry cut more deeply than any exhausted equilibrium. I made every word sound more like a promise than a wish and said, "We're going to be okay." He made an effort to take everything. "But he misjudged you and me in particular." I drew her into an embrace as my thoughts began to go into research mode. Cutting off toxic family members is a common topic on the internet, but what does it really entail when your toxic family member has your social security number and routing information? Do you make sure they can never harm you again, or do you try to forgive them later when the betrayal occurs within the home? 3 days later, my phone lit up with an unknown number and the kind of timing that feels staged. Just as I was beginning to think we might make it out of this with just bruises rather than fractures. I was guiding my friend and colleague Jenna Walsh through the logs I had retrieved from the bank portal during a video conference. We had already verified that the device's fingerprint matched the outdated Android that my brother refused to update, and we had prepared an incident report in case I needed to exert more pressure on the bank. Using her sketchbook, Chloe sat at the far end of the table and drew small comic panels of Security Girl and Supermom kicking a cartoon villain out of a bank vault. The phone rang again, demandingly. I didn't recognize the Texas area code. My microphone was muted. Hold on, Mag. I'll take this. My eardrum was attacked as soon as I responded. Natalie, what the devil did you do? It was Travis Parker, my brother. No greeting, no apologies, just unadulterated, terrified fury. His voice set off muscle memory for a split second. In a small apartment, two teenagers share instant noodles and make a commitment to always support one another. The present then slammed back. He had attempted to rob his niece of her sight. Good evening to you as well, I said, sounding colder than I actually was. How are things outside of Charlotte? Breathing as if he had been running, he swore once more. Avoid playing games. You put the accounts on hold. The bank is posing inquiries. I received a call from their fraud department. They are discussing law enforcement. You didn't have the authority to stop. I interrupted. You're ruining my daughter's future. The word daughter caused Chloe's head to snap up. It's okay. I mouthed and gestured to her room. After a moment of hesitation, she silently closed the door behind her and vanished with her tablet. I went on to say, you used access I gave you years ago when I was foolish enough to believe that family meant something. You believed that you and your girlfriend could leave everything behind and vanish into a motel. And you're upset with me for catching you? I had never heard him laugh so loudly and uglily. You got me? This is over a few transfers, do you think? What you just stepped into is completely unknown to you. Those transactions are flagged by you. You put those accounts on hold. For those who don't want their money tampered with, you cause trouble. I wasn't just screwed by you. They were screwed by you. Are you aware of what happens to those who postpone payments? A shiver ran down my back. Who are they? Not important, he yelled. Unfreezing the accounts is all you need to know. The bank will come after you if you don't explain that there was a miscommunication. You and the young girl you feel such pride in. With a cold, accurate weight, the threat hit the ground. It's possible that I, the older sister, who used to support him and tell mom lies on his behalf, gave in. However, the version of me that had cleaned up after ransomware teams and tracked down extortion emails to low-cost, offshore bulletproof hosts knew when to bluff. Do you believe that I'm afraid of criminals? I asked quietly. I spend my nights dissecting malware that even the most brilliant people can hardly spell. The distinction is that they never used my mother's kitchen together. You did, which makes your actions worse rather than better. He swore once more, but this time it sounded more like fear than anger. He growled, you'll regret this. You recently signed your own notice of eviction. He ended the call. This time, my hand trembled, but not out of fear, out of clarity. He didn't call to discuss Chloe's tuition or our roof. He called because my one-year-old was being squeezed by his partners after he unintentionally tripped a wire in whatever scheme he had gotten himself into. My laptop was unmuted. The screen was filled with Jenna Walsh's wide-eyed face. She remarked. I caught most of that. I apologize. Don't be, I answered. If we properly record this, he just admitted enough to hang himself. The following hour was devoted to recording everything. The timestamps. The IDs of the devices. I could still clearly recall the exact words of his threat. Jenna then inclined toward her webcam. You see, she said, I also serve as a consultant for that financial crimes task force. They need to know if your brother is using your accounts or identity as part of a larger scam. Are you prepared for this to become a case file instead of a family drama? I turned to see a glimmer of light peeking under the frame of Chloe's closed door. Are you ready? No. However, had we gone beyond the point at which a guilty apology and repayment plan would suffice? Of course. I asked, what does it mean when the blood is poisoning the well if blood is supposed to be thicker than water? Yes, I replied. Connect me with someone you can trust. Would you still consider your brother family if he emptied your accounts, threatened your child, and then accused you of defending yourself? Or would you treat him like all the other criminals you've ever reported? I turned my professional tools on my own life that night after Chloe dozed off while holding her stuffed axolotl. I sat in the light from my two monitors, a mug of cold coffee sweating by my elbow. Detective Amanda Reyes, a contact from the state's Financial Crimes Unit, was brought in by Jenna. Although she was unable to provide me with official advice at this time, she had some excellent preservation recommendations. During a rough video call, Detective Reyes had stated, "Document everything. Screenshots. Call records. Emails. Don't go up to him directly again unless we can arrange it. And it's not your fault, Natalie. We've frequently observed this pattern. Fraud that begins with them taking money from people they know. Instead of someone stealing their niece's college funds, I would have argued that cybercrime should be defined as impersonal lines of code. Rather, I started dragging my life into a new encrypted vault. I opened Chloe's sketchbook while downloads churned. She'd thrust it at me that afternoon, smiling shyly. She had declared, "I made a new comic." 2 timelines were displayed on each page. Bright panels of the former uncle are on the left. She learned how to flip eggs without breaking the yolk from the person who once assisted us in moving into our first secure apartment. The current uncle is shown on the right, eyes shaded, slinking into a bank vault as tiny cartoon alarms go off. She had written in blocky letters underneath, "Sometimes people can turn into villains." I had laughed back then, in part to keep myself from crying. The pages now felt like proof I was gathering without realizing it. I also took impulsive pictures of the panels and stored them in the vault. Although they had no legal value, they did recover what had been taken and could not be replaced by compensation. A child's handwriting the tale of my brother's former self. My email was pinging. What Chloe's quick thinking had bought us was confirmed by a message from the bank's fraud department. There was still disagreement over the final transfer. He hadn't received the money yet, but it hadn't returned to my account either. The message said, "We're temporarily restricting the recipient account pending investigation." Translation: someone had just choked his side of the pipeline. Another notification flashed 20 minutes later, from an unfamiliar throwaway address. Subject: "You ought to cease your digging. No salutations." Not a signature. There is only one sentence in the body. "Unless you want everyone's secrets to be revealed, family business is best managed internally." A link is below. I could see Jenna's face floating in my head. The first rule is to never click on unsolicited links, especially when someone is attempting to frighten you. Instead, I examined the URL by hovering over it. It brought me to a well-known public forum where people would exchange get-rich-quick schemes that were actually just barely sanitized scams. I opened it in a sandbox setting, which was against my better judgment. My first name appeared in the title of a thread at the top. Screenshots of my company's website, my LinkedIn profile, and a cropped picture of Chloe and me at a coding fair are all included. The person who had posted them was a man named Derek Vance, whose handle I recognized from old tales my brother used to boast about. He had always maintained that his partner was simply socially adept. My stomach fell. Speculating about the amount of pressure required before the sister caves, users made jokes about using me to unlock frozen funds in the comments. And one particularly endearing person proposed giving her child a little fright. My digits became numb. The floor creaked behind me. Before I could snap the laptop shut, Chloe popped up in the doorway, her hair in a drowsy halo. "Are you still employed?" she whispered. "It's late." I made an effort to grin. "Just wrapping up, bug. Return to your bed. Tomorrow is a big day. Will we still be attending the meeting for the art fundraiser?" she asked, looking a little happier. She had come up with a concept. Perhaps the community could assist if we were unable to promptly return the money. In order to raise money for Chloe's emergency fund, she wanted to plan a digital art sale with her classmates. I had agreed, in part because it gave her a sense of strength. In part because it felt oddly reassuring to consider accepting assistance from someone unrelated to me. "Yes," I replied. "We are. Additionally, we will speak with some adults who are skilled at handling villains." "All right." She gave a nod, then paused. "Mom, does that mean I'm related to a villain if he used to be your brother and is now somewhat of a villain?" In that forum, the question struck more forcefully than any threat. I said cautiously, "You're related to a man who makes terrible choices. It is up to you what you do with that. You have 2 options, either you learn from his mistakes and construct better walls, or you repeat them. You have begun working on the second one already." After giving this some thought, she nodded decisively and returned to her bed. My phone buzzed with a fresh message from Jenna as her door clicked shut. An image of a profile from the same forum. Using a name that is dangerously close to mine, this one with my brother's handle subtly promotes investment opportunities. She wrote, "He's not just robbing you. He's making his scams seem more legitimate by using your identity. A brief note from Detective Reyes was attached. An official case is being opened. Never react to any threats. Tell us when he reaches out again, which he will. We could use that interaction as leverage. If you came across a thread where strangers were plotting to scare you into silence, would you still scroll? Or would you begin taking screenshots and using their personal business as proof? It was not Detective Reyes' fault. It took very little time. The following afternoon, as Chloe and I were brainstorming poster ideas for her art fundraiser with the other children in a packed community center, my phone vibrated with a fresh text from an unidentified number. It was angrier, sloppier, and shorter. Do you believe that strangers will save your life? It's getting worse because of you. Give me a call right now. I disregarded it. Rather, I observed Chloe present her storyboard to a group of parents and neighbors, explaining how each artwork would convey a brief tale about safe money and danger money. On the flyer, she had sketched a superhero cape on a piggy bank. Kids also need to know this stuff, she said in a matter-of-fact manner. Because sometimes adults don't listen until it's too late. The date aloud. The raw pride that swelled in my chest was almost enough to drown out the dread. Nearly. After the meeting, as we headed for the car, a man stepped away from the shade of a live oak tree near the parking lot. My body tensed, but then I recognized the face from grainy photos my brother had once shown me on an old phone. Nolan Mercer, former friend, sometime accomplice, the guy who had gotten out of their schemes by going straight at a warehouse job. Natalie, he called quietly, hands raised slightly like he wanted to show he was unarmed. Don't freak out. I texted you earlier. I didn't think you'd answer, so I came here instead. Every instinct screamed at me to grab Chloe and run. Instead, I put an arm around her shoulders and said, "Go sit in the car, bug. Lock the doors. I'll be right there." She obeyed without argument. Eyes flicking from Nolan to me, reading my posture like a threat meter. When she shut the door, I turned on him. "You have exactly 45 seconds to explain why you're stalking my kid's fundraiser." He flinched. Up close. He looked older than I remembered from those photos. Deeper lines around his eyes. Shoulders that had lost some of their swagger. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "If anything, I'm here because I think they might, and I'm trying to stop that before it gets that far." "They?" I repeated. "You mean my brother and his charming business partner?" He glanced around, lowering his voice. "You really want to say their names out loud when you know they hang out on those forums, watch your socials, know your routines?" That caught me off guard. "You've seen the threads. I'm watching, and us. I used to post in some of them," he admitted. "Back when I thought it was harmless. Chargeback tricks, fake refunds, stuff nobody gets really hurt by, but then they escalated. Crypto exit scams, romance cons. The whole package. Your brother and his girlfriend, Kendra Blake, they're in deep with a crew that doesn't care who gets hurt as long as the wallets fatten. When you froze those accounts, you cut off more than his little payday. You jammed up a pipeline they were counting on." He swallowed. "They're blaming you. They're scared. And scared people do stupid things." For a second, the parking lot sounds faded. The hum of traffic. The squeak of a shopping cart nearby. And all I heard was my brother's earlier hiss in my ear. "You didn't just screw me, you screwed them." I crossed my arms. "Why tell me this? Why now?" His gaze flicked toward the car where Chloe sat watching us. "Because there's a kid involved," he said simply. "And because I've got a kid on the way. My girl is 4 months pregnant." I told myself I was out of that life, but the truth is I've still been in group chats, still seeing things I don't want my son to grow up around this. He gestured between us. "It feels like my last shot at doing something decent before I lose the right to call myself a father." I studied him, weighing the risk. If Detective Reyes was going to build a case, an insider could be gold, or he could be bait. "You're willing to talk to law enforcement?" I asked on record. He flinched, then nodded. "If that's what it takes, I'm not doing it for him," he added quickly. He made his choices. "I'm doing it so you don't have to pay for them." That night, we set up a virtual meeting. Me at my kitchen table, Jenna on her dual monitors, Detective Reyes in a small office with file boxes stacked behind her, and Nolan sitting in his dim living room, the glow of his TV casting flickers on the wall. He laid everything out, the Telegram channels, the Discord servers, the way my brother bragged about using his cybersecurity as a silent endorsement for investment marks. He described drop accounts, mule chains, burner phones. I watched Detective Reyes' expression shift from neutral to focused predator. We can work with this, she said when he finished. If you're willing to wear a wire or capture some of these conversations under our direction, we can not only protect Natalie, we can dismantle more than one little hustle. Nolan looked exhausted, but strangely lighter. Tell me where to be, he said. When the call ended, I sat for a long moment, staring at the black reflection of my own face in the blank screen. Chloe wandered in, hair still damp from her shower, hugging her axolotl. Is it over? She asked. Not yet, I said. But we're not alone anymore. We've got a team now. She brightened. Like a squad. Exactly. I smiled. Me, you, Jenna, Detective Reyes, and Nolan, the good kind of crew. Can I be the strategist? She asked eagerly. I already made a list of all the apps Uncle used and all the times he came over and helped with your computer. That's like data points. Right? I stared at her notebook, densely packed with dates and little icons. Somewhere between comics and cartoons, my daughter had quietly started doing her own intelligence gathering. Yeah, I said softly. Those are exactly data points. How far would you go to protect your kid from a criminal who shares your last name? Work with one of his old accomplices, wear a wire, walk into a trap you helped set, or would you cut ties and pray distance was enough? The trap, when it finally took shape, felt less like a movie sting, and more like a meticulously planned panic attack. Detective Reyes's team wanted something clean. My brother, on record, demanding I unfreeze the funds, admitting the money wasn't his, maybe even bragging about the bigger operation he'd plugged into. The problem was, he'd already burned one bridge with that screaming phone call. We needed a reason for him to believe I'd changed my mind. That's where Chloe infuriatingly came in. He thinks you're soft, she said one evening as we sat on the floor assembling canvases for the fundraiser. He thinks if he scares you enough, you'll forgive him like before. So if you call and say you're scared now, he'll believe you. It stung hearing my history of enabling summarized so neatly by an 1-year-old. It also wasn't wrong. With Detective Reyes listening in on a secure line and the call recorder running, I dialed. He answered on the second ring. What do you want? He snapped. I injected a tremor into my voice I didn't entirely have to fake. You were right, I said. This is bigger than I thought. They, whoever they are, sent me messages. They know where I work. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about her. I let my voice catch on the last word. I can't let anything happen to my daughter. He exhaled, the sound almost smug. Told you. You're out of your depth. Maybe, I said. But I talked to the bank. There might be a way to fix this. If you meet me, sign some forms. We can say it was a misunderstanding. Husband and wife account, clerical error, whatever. They like tidy stories. I could almost hear his greed, warring with paranoia. Meet where Town Lake, I said. The public trail near the big sculpture. Lots of people. Broad daylight. I'm not going anywhere sketchy. Detective Reyes had insisted. Visible, crowded, cameras everywhere. Less risk to me, more data for them. Fine, he muttered. Tomorrow, 1 p. And Natalie, don't try anything stupid. You're not the only one who can make phone calls. The next day was one of those deceptively beautiful Texas afternoons. Sunlight glittering on the water, joggers and families and cyclists turning the trail into a moving tapestry. Under my sweatshirt, a tiny transmitter sat warm against my skin, its wire taped carefully along my ribs. Chloe was nowhere near the park. Jenna had taken her to a co-working space under the guise of a Bring Your Kid to Code Day. Armed with pizza, educational videos, and strict instructions to keep her away from any live feeds Detective Reyes might be monitoring, I still felt her absence like a missing limb. Nolan sat on a bench half a block away, pretending to scroll his phone, an earpiece hidden under his baseball cap. He was our early warning system. If my brother showed up with muscle, Nolan's job was to tell Detective Reyes's team before I saw them. He's here. Came the detective's murmur in my ear, just as my brother's silhouette separated itself from the crowd, hands jammed into the pockets of a hoodie, his eyes darting more than I remembered. He'd lost weight. Or maybe he just looked smaller now that I'd stopped mentally inflating him into the fearless kid who used to stand between me and school bullies. You look like crap, he said by way of hello. Stress doesn't suit you. Stealing from family doesn't suit you either, I replied. Because even wired up and flanked by unseen officers, I couldn't help myself. He rolled his eyes. Are we doing this or not? I held up a folder thick with papers. Detective Reyes had helped me prepare forms, fake bank letters, enough bureaucratic weight to make the scene look legitimate if anyone was watching. "We are," I said. "But I need to hear you say something first. Why did you do it?" He snorted. "Seriously, you want a therapy session in the middle of the park? Humor me." I pressed. "If I'm going to commit fraud for you, I at least want the courtesy of honesty." He glanced around, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Because I was tired of scraping by," he hissed. "Because you got out, got your fancy tech job and your nice apartment and your perfect little girl, and I got left with temp work and debts. Because for once, the universe handed me a shortcut. You left the door open, Natalie. I just walked through it. By wiping out your niece's savings, I said that shortcut." His jaw tightened. "I told you I was going to pay it back." "With what?" I inquired. "The profits from the scams you and Kendra are running using my name." His eyes flashed. "You've been talking to people," he said slowly. "You think they're your friends? These cops and nerds you work with. You think they're going to keep you safe when the people behind me decide you're more trouble than you're worth?" "That's the thing," I said, feeling a strange calm settle. "You talk about them like they're some unstoppable force, but I've seen their code. I've read their posts. They're just cowards hiding behind screens. And you? You're just a man who stole from a child and got caught." He opened his mouth, words gathering like a storm. And that's when a voice from behind him cut in, sharp and shaking. "He's right. You are a coward." We both turned. Kendra Blake stood a few feet away, eyeliner smudged, jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. I hadn't seen her in person since a blurry holiday dinner years ago. Now she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "What are you doing here?" My brother snarled. "You were supposed to stay at the motel. And miss the show." She shot back, "Please, I wanted to see if you'd actually lie to her face about paying her back. You told me this was just redistributing from a sister who wouldn't miss it. You never said there was a kid." Guilt flickered across his face, then hardened. "You are happy enough to spend the deposits," he said. "Don't grow a conscience now." She looked at me, and in that one glance I saw fear, anger, and the brittle edge of someone who'd realized too late she'd picked the losing side. "They're watching you. You know," she said. "The guys in the group, they think if they squeeze you hard enough, you'll get her to crack. But they're not the only ones watching." Somewhere behind us, a car door slammed. My brother flinched. "Shut up," he hissed. "You want all of us in cuffs? Maybe that's better than spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." She snapped. "I'm done being your shield." He reached for her arm. Fingers digging in. "And that was enough. We've heard what we need." Detective Reyes said in my ear, calm as a metronome. "Step back, Natalie." I took one step away. Two. Then everything happened at once. Plainclothes officers converging from 3 directions. Badges flashing. Voices barking commands. My brother spinning trying to bolt. Nolan standing up from his bench. Hands visible. Kendra freezing like a deer in headlights. As Detective Reyes herself stepped in, reciting rights in a tone that suggested she'd done this 100 times, and never stopped seeing the human cost, my brother's eyes met mine as they cuffed him. For a moment, the fury drained out, leaving something hollow. "You did this," he said almost wonderingly. "To your own family." "No," I answered softly. "You did this to yourself. I just stopped you from doing worse." He screamed then. Not words. Just raw frustration. The sound echoing off the water as they led him away. Later, Chloe would watch the news clip and ask why he yelled like that. I'd tell her the truth that sometimes when people finally meet consequences they never expected to face, it's not remorse that erupts first. It's disbelief that the rules actually applied to them after all. If you saw your own sibling in handcuffs, would you feel guilt for being the one to call in backup or relief that the cycle you'd been trapped in your whole life might finally be breaking? In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically snap back into place. There were depositions, court dates, paperwork stacks taller than Chloe, and long evenings where I sat at the dining table filling out victim statements while she did math homework on the other end. Detective Reyes's team peeled back layers of the scam like the world's ugliest onion. Not just my drained accounts, but more than 40 of others. Lonely retirees. Single parents. Even a nonprofit that thought they were investing surplus funds for high-yield returns. The more we learned, the harder it became to remember the kid who'd once split his last slice of pizza with me. At the preliminary hearing, I sat behind the bar with Jenna on one side and Nolan and his pregnant girlfriend on the other. Kendra testified, too, voice shaking but steady, describing late-night meetings and instructions barked through encrypted apps by men who never use their real names. My brother avoided my gaze, jaw clenched so tight I wondered if he'd crack a murr before the judge finished reading the charges. Identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. When the prosecutor laid out how he'd used my credentials as a trust anchor to lure victims, something inside me finally snapped the rest of the way. Any lingering fantasy about the brother I used to know dissolved. This was who he had chosen to be. Months later, he took a plea deal. 17 years. With restitution obligations that would likely follow him long after parole. No dramatic last-minute apology. No terrory confession. Just a signed agreement and averted eyes. The bank, under pressure from both regulators and bad press, quietly agreed to cover a significant portion of my losses, citing internal access control failures. It didn't erase the sleepless nights, but it meant Chloe and I wouldn't be packing our lives into boxes and moving into some basement. A chunk of the seized funds was allocated to victims, including us. When the letter came, Chloe watched me open it, fingers twisting the hem of her t-shirt. "Is it over?" she asked. Over turned out to be the wrong word. "We're safer," I said. "That's a better word." Safety became our new baseline project. I sat her down and walked her through credit freezes, two-factor authentication, why we don't reuse passwords, even for boring sites. She showed me the notebook where she'd logged all the apps my brother had ever touched on my phone, tiny red skulls next to the ones that gave her a bad feeling. Together, we made a poster for her school's tech fair, How to Protect Your Future, Even from Family. The title raised a few eyebrows among the teachers until I volunteered to give a short workshop for parents on digital hygiene and financial boundaries. Standing in front of that room, explaining to other tired, overworked adults, why helping a relative by sharing login or letting them fix your computer could be more dangerous than any stranger on the dark web. I felt something shift. For years, I'd drawn a hard line between my work in cybersecurity and my personal life. As if the rules didn't apply at home because love somehow encrypted everything. Now I knew better. Love without boundaries isn't security. It's exposure. One evening, months after the sentencing, I found Chloe at the kitchen table working on a new comic. This one showed our squad lined up in superhero poses. Me with a laptop shield. Jenna firing code like confetti. Detective Reyes wielding a giant badge. Nolan holding a baby in one arm and tearing up a fake credit card with the other. Off to the side, behind bars made of ones and zeros, a small figure sat with his head in his hands. She'd drawn a caption bubble above him. I thought shortcuts would set me free. Underneath, in block letters, but real freedom isn't built on someone else's ruin. Do you think he'll ever say sorry? She asked without looking up. I considered lying. Maybe someday, I said instead. But we can't live our lives waiting for that. The real apology is what we do with what happened. The walls we build, the people we help so they don't end up where we did. She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and added one last speech bubble next to the drawn version of herself. Boundaries aren't mean. They're safety rails. Later that night, alone with my thoughts, I scrolled back through old photos. 2 kids in thrift store clothes. Leaning against each other and laughing. A young man holding a newborn Chloe with terrified pride. A blurry Thanksgiving, where he'd washed dishes without being asked. I didn't delete them. Pretending those moments never existed wouldn't make the last year any less real. Instead, I created a new album and named it Before. The rest of my camera roll, the court selfies, the fundraiser photos, the tech poster, Chloe's comics became After. The line between them wasn't clean, but it was honest. Family, I'd learned, isn't a magic shield against harm. Sometimes it's the source. The trick is learning when loyalty is love, and when it's just fear dressed up as obligation. When someone uses your trust as their favorite exploit, you have every right to patch the vulnerability, even if it means cutting them off from the system entirely. So now I'll ask you what I ask myself on the nights when the house is quiet and the notifications have finally stopped. When blood betrays you, what's the real lesson? Endless forgiveness, no matter the cost, or the courage to say, this is where my story changes, even if yours doesn't. And if you've ever had to build a new life on the rubble of a family betrayal, what boundary did you wish you'd drawn sooner? My brother mocked me as still unemployed. I said nothing. 7 minutes later, HR started sending termination emails. My name is Avery Bennett. I'm 31. And a few nights ago, my own brother turned me into a punchline in front of individuals whose salary I literally approve of. He clinked his glass, drew everyone's attention to me, and asked loudly enough for the entire private area to hear, "Can we all give it up for my little sister? And unemployed? And figuring things out." At 31, the chamber burst. Some of them whistled, while others screamed speeches. And someone near the bar genuinely exclaimed, "Career mode spectator." They laughed as if my existence was a meme, as if I were some useless extra in a movie in which they played the leads. None of them were aware that each of them had completed onboarding papers for a company I founded. None of them realized the faceless ownership organization that controlled their bonuses was simply me, a girl they determined didn't count. I did not defend myself. I didn't mention my clients, my sales figures, or the fact that the campaign they had been talking about all night began as a sketch in my inexpensive notepad on the kitchen table. I simply smiled, lifted my glass, and let them believe they'd nailed it. Allow them to believe the story they wanted, that I was the loser sister who never quite made it. Because, as they laughed, I was already making decisions in my head about contracts, authority, and what it truly meant to flip a table without touching a single plate. They felt they were embarrassing me. They had no idea that 7 minutes later, the jest would turn into HR emails, revoked badges, and a meeting they would never forget. Do something for me before I walk you into that room and show you exactly what I said once I open my mouth. Leave a comment and let me know what time it is, where you are, and which nation you are watching from. I want to see how far a story about family, ego, and revenge can go. The thing with being the unemployed sibling is that it doesn't begin the night someone humiliates you. It begins several years earlier in living rooms, kitchens, and school auditoriums, when people determine who you are and then never bother to update the file. Growing up, my brother was always the star. If you walked into our house, you'd find framed images of him in jerseys, blazers, and graduation gowns, beaming as if the world was designed to congratulate him. My accomplishments were stored in drawers, along with certificates that my mother intended to display when she had the time. They never got to the wall. Our mother, Elaine, did not refer to it as favoritism. She called it encouragement. When he made the varsity basketball team, she planned a celebration. When I won first place in a regional design competition, she responded, "That's wonderful, honey. Perhaps you could aid your brother with his project." I learned early on that in our family, charm always won out over silent effort. The first time my brother Mason Bennett stole something from me, it was credit, not money. I was 15, he was 18, and he failed to inform the judges of his business club competition that the app mock-up he was presenting was mine. I'd spent 4 nights sewing together screens using free software on an ancient laptop. He won first place. Everyone shouted, and he let them label him a natural, as I applauded from the back of the auditorium. This was not the last time. He became acclimated to standing in spotlights that I had wired for him in the dark. I grew used to swallowing it. Fast forward to my late 20s. While everyone felt I was drifting, I was developing something that my family didn't see as successful since it didn't match their script. No corner office with my name on the door, no corporate ladder, just me, a rented desk in a co-working place, and an unseemly quantity of caffeine. I founded Brightline Collective, a boutique creative business that provided digital strategy and content to brands looking to appear young and loud online. Snorts. At first, it was just me and a few freelancers. Then it was just me and 3 full-timers. Then it was me and a 24-person team, with clients whose logos my parents recognized from TV advertising. But here is the bit that will raise your eyebrows. Almost no one, including my family, knew that I owned Brightline. My COO, Grant Sullivan, served as the agency's public face. He conducted the interviews, took the stage, and smiled for the industry listings. On paper, he was the CEO. Behind the scenes, the controlling ownership was quietly held under an LLC with my name on it. That was deliberate. I wanted to make something without my family's judgment, without my brother claiming credit or my mother comparing us to contestants. So, when they inquired how work was doing, I told them what they already believed. I'm a freelancer. I am figuring things out. That's okay. It stayed that way for years, until the day Brightline's HR manager, unaware that she was speaking with the owner's sister, presented me a CV and stated, "We had a referral from a family friend for this person. Seems charming, a little light on actual results, but his references talk about him like he's a wizard with clients." My brother's name, Mason Bennett, appeared at the top of the CV. My stomach sank. He had applied for a senior account manager position at my agency. He'd skipped over 2 positions he'd left and stroked figures that didn't belong to him. Typical. Grant admired his confidence and ability to talk his way through mock scenarios. He may be excellent in front of clients. He informed me that we could train him on the rest. He had no idea that the person he was attempting to sell me on was the same kid who had told me, "You're good as a behind-the-scenes type. Not everyone is supposed to be noticed." I had an option. Block the hire and disclose myself, or let Mason in and watch what he did while thinking he was just another employee. In what now appears to be foreshadowing, I said, "If the team thinks he's a fit, let's try him." Mason joined Brightline without ever connecting the dots. The corporation did not have my name on it. The downtown structure was a repurposed warehouse complete with exposed brickwork and neon logos. Nothing like the beige offices my parents pictured when they considered a real job. Mason assumed I was bouncing between shows, sleeping on couches, and helping out here and there. The few times he saw me at work, he assumed I was merely visiting a buddy. He never asked what I did there. It matched the story in his imagination. He was on a career route, whereas I was a creative drifter. The night he insulted me, still unemployed, was only the latest scene in a screenplay he'd been reading for our whole lives. Only this time, he'd invited a group of people I knew too well. Because those pals behind him, the ones celebrating and yelling and calling me a failure, were Brightline employees, strategy leaders, video producers, social managers, and people whose first-day paperwork I had personally read before accepting their offers. People who had sat in our all-hands meetings and listened to Grant speak about our nameless majority owner as if he were a remote, faceless investor. People who had no notion that the vagrant they were insulting was the one who could cancel their health insurance with a simple signature. My phone buzzed in my pocket that night, but it wasn't a social notification. It was an email notification from my personal mailbox. Formal complaint, workplace harassment, anonymous. The timing was set 12 minutes before my brother's toast. The complaint outlined a series of comments, jokes, and pranks by a senior account manager who enjoyed humiliating junior employees in front of clients. The initials were not subtle. MB. I read the sentences as laughter erupted around me. The anonymous employee added one last note. I don't feel comfortable bringing this to HR because everyone appears to like him. If someone higher up doesn't intervene soon, I'm resigning. I stood there with my drink, watching my brother bask in recognition he didn't deserve and listening to individuals I hired to represent my agency shout along. And something in me snapped, not in a loud, glasses-throwing way, but in the quiet, surgical way that occurs when you realize you've given too much benefit of doubt. That email was my line in the sand. Mason believed that his last name would always protect him. My family assumed I would always keep the peace. Everyone in that room thought I was still unemployed. None of them were prepared for what happened when I stopped letting them write my story for me. If you've ever hidden your accomplishments to keep the peace at home, you know how thick that mask can be. What happens when you decide to tear it off in front of everyone? At first glance, Mason at Brightline appeared to be a winner. He remembered names quickly, made the interns feel valued, and transformed tedious briefings into something enjoyable. We needed this energy, someone told me. I wanted to believe it. Then the patterns I remembered from childhood came back. A junior strategist missed a slide and remarked, "It's fine. You're not here for your brain, anyway." Everyone laughed. Her face did not. At happy hour, he imitated a video editor's stammer. In meetings, he'd say things like, "Let the kids take a pass, then the adults will fix it." All joking, all dismissed with, "Relax. I'm kidding." The reports arrived in parts. Claire's calm comment, a DM about off-the-wall jokes, and a copywriter wondering if we had an anonymous reporting method. My old instincts kicked in. Perhaps they are overreacting. He probably does not mean it. That was the tale I had used to get through Mason for years. Then we brought in a dream client, a massive beauty brand. Grant and Claire nailed their strategy. The room had a pleasant atmosphere. Mason was expected to handle chemistry. Instead, he went off script. I told our team, he added, indicating toward the client. Even my little sister who can't hold down a job could get this one right. He just cracked a joke. The client did not. He took another swipe at aspiring creatives who were designing on their laptops. We lost the deal formally. Different agency direction. Unofficially. Through the grapevine. Someone on your team had strange energy and treated his jobless sister as if she were a joke. It didn't feel right. Grant sighed and dropped the email on his desk. We need to speak about Mason. People avoid his accounts. Now this. While we were dealing with the consequences, Claire sent me a folder with screenshots of Slack threads, chat snippets, and a voice memo from the bar. He was calling a junior designer, our diversity recruit, telling an intern, "If you can't handle pressure, go back to group projects." He was bragging. Even my unemployed sister could do better with Canva. There were emojis and laughs, some from the same individuals who'd celebrate later in the lounge. Seeing it all together dispelled any notion that this was just edgy humor. It was a pattern. Power was utilized to keep other people tiny. And it was taking place right under my roof. I stopped searching for gentle explanations and began prepared. I asked HR to lead me through the formal disciplinary process. I reviewed what we'd captured for training purposes. With their permission, I sat down with a few of the people Mason had injured. They were angry, embarrassed, and fatigued. Most had remained silent because they felt he was safe. In the stories, I recognized old versions of myself. By the time Mason lifted his glass and announced that I was still unemployed, I had already made my decision. That toast did not cause the problem. It simply stated, loudly and clearly, that he saw me in the same manner he saw my colleagues underneath him. The next morning, I organized the all-hands meeting that would change everything, not about campaigns or goals, but about who we were willing to be when someone's jokes began to cost people their dignity. The subject line of the invitation said, all hands, culture, and conduct mandatory. No emojis, no fluff. By 9:30 a.m., the conference room was full. Some people appeared uptight, bored, and defensive. Mason walked in late with an iced coffee, smiled, and took a seat near the center, as if he were about to attend a show rather than star in it. Grant opened. We can't do our best work if people feel small or scared. He told me. Today is not about blaming a single person. It's about holding a mirror up to all of us. He navigated to a PowerPoint with an anonymous complaint quotation. I feel like I'm one bad joke away from being publicly embarrassed. The audience fell silent. My turn. Mason was on a Zoom call when I stepped up and clicked play on the initial tape. If you can't manage a client raising their voice, this may not be the industry for you. We can't all be frail little art students. Nervous laughter echoes in the background. The second clip. A bar recording. We're practically a charity for junior talent, Mason's voice said. Have you seen any of the portfolios HR sends? My unemployed sister might do better with Canva. This time, the audience did not laugh. They heard their own prior reactions reflected back at them. Then came the Slack screenshots. Relax. It's simply banter. If they can't take a joke, they're in the wrong place. A query follows. Whose comfort are we safeguarding when we refer to bullying as banter? I face them. I developed this location so that individuals don't have to sacrifice their dignity in order to collect a paycheck. The way some of you have been spoken to does not reflect who we claim to be. Mason lifted his hand in disbelief. Are we really playing hidden recordings? We have not wrecked a bee. We have not wrecked a bee. He scoffed. Anyone who knows me understands that I'm kidding. You're making me sound like a villain. If I offended someone's feelings, they may just tell me. Claire spoke forward, her voice firm yet tense. Yes, Mason. Some of us did. You told us we were overly sensitive and made jokes about it. You could feel the shift. The normal energy traveled to the person calling it out, not the one deflecting. Mason felt it, and his tone became sharper. We're in advertising, not kindergarten, he informed me. If we start policing jokes, there will be nothing left. And you, he pointed at me, you don't even have a proper job, Avery. You float around making mood boards and then you're the morality police. The old version of myself would have shrunk. Instead, I advanced to the final slide. Power isn't only something you have. It is anything you are willing to employ. You're right. I replied quietly. This is not kindergarten. In kindergarten, there are repercussions for intentionally hurting others. At this level, there are contracts. After this meeting, there will be more conversations, some of which will result in people leaving the company. Mason sneered. So, what? Are you threatening me now? I'm promising this squad something I should have promised earlier, I said. No one is untouchable, including you. The discussion finished with more questions than answers for the majority of the attendees, but the next step was clear to me. The public mirror was up. Now I had to close the door and speak to Mason, Not as his little sister, not as the girl he could roast in front of clients, but as the person who genuinely possessed the authority he kept claiming to have. What happened in that smaller room would determine if this was just another dramatic meeting that everyone spoke about, or if Brightline had finally transformed. Following the all-hands meeting, the office felt like it was holding its breath. People shuffled back to their workstations in groups, murmuring in hushed tones and looking over shoulders to see where Mason had gone. He vanished into a conference room and slammed the door, his body language exuding rage so loud it might have been printed on a billboard. Grant lingered beside me, running a hand through his hair. "Are you certain you don't want me in the room when you chat to him?" he asked quietly. "I need to do this alone," I said. "Yes, he is his manager, but he also serves another function." I did not include the term sister. Grant had no idea about that section yet. Only a few people did. The lines I had made to keep my world separate were about to be wiped in a single stroke. Back in my office, I opened my laptop to be ready for the conversation. I opened Mason's file, which had performance notes, feedback, and a formal complaint that had arrived in my inbox the night of his toast. As I was reviewing it, another email arrived in my inbox with the subject line "Read today's meeting. Please read." The message was sent from an anonymous address and passed through our internal system. I didn't feel safe speaking in the room. The note stated, "But I need you to understand that this is more than just a joke. Mason has been telling people that some regulations do not apply to him since he has a strong sense of leadership. He's pressed subordinate workers to stay out late with clients, even when they express discomfort. He's intimated that those who don't get his sense of humor will not advance here. And last week, he informed us that your job is just to approve vibrations, while he is the one who brings real money into the organization. I'm not sure how much of that you see, but from where many of us are sitting, he's been permitted to behave like he's invincible. Today gave me hope that maybe that isn't true." Additional screenshots were attached. Messages in which Mason boasted about billing personal outings as client appointments. In a group conversation, he graded coworkers' attractiveness on a scale, and joked about who would never interact with clients. In one communication, he stated, "Trust me, I'm okay here. My sister basically lives on Grant's sofa. She's not about to upset the boat for anyone." That statement hit me in a vulnerable spot I hadn't realized was exposed. To Mason, I was still the girl who slept on friends' couches, scraping by, living on the outskirts of other people's prosperity. He had no idea that the couch I occasionally fell asleep on in Grant's office belonged to a company that had my name on the deed. A knock on my door jolted me out of my spiral. It was Claire. "Have you got a minute?" she inquired. I nodded. She stepped inside and locked the door behind her. "I understand you are dealing with a lot, but people are talking. A few of them are afraid. Some are hopeful. They're not sure which way this will go. If Mason walks out of that room with you and nothing changes, many of us will accept that as our answer." Despite the fact that I was aware, I inquired, "that this place is just like everywhere else?" She continued softly, "That talented people are chewed up so that a few loud ones can continue to play king. I do not want Brightline to be like that. But I'm not sure I can stay if that's the case." Her comments weighed heavily on the decision that was already building in my chest. This was more than just a punishment for bad behavior. It was about stating clearly what we stood for and didn't. Any decision I made would reverberate throughout the building, long after the news of the dramatic encounter faded. After Claire went, I stared at my reflection in the dark glass for a long time. I noticed the girl who had applauded at the back of the audience as her brother accepted a trophy for her efforts. I noticed the woman who understated her accomplishments so that her family wouldn't accuse her of bragging. I also saw the owner of a business that deserved more than the silent concessions she'd been making to keep everyone happy. I sent one mail to HR. "Please create a termination document for Mason Bennett, Senior Account Manager. I'll manage the conversation personally." Then, for the first time, I fully included Grant. I strolled into his office, locked the door, and said, "I have something I should have told you a long time ago. Mason is more than simply an employee to me. He's my brother." He raised his brow. "That's a twist," he added softly. "And you still want to forward with this?" "I want to move forward because of it," I said. "If I can't hold my own family accountable, I have no business asking this team to trust me." Grant observed my expression and concurred. "Okay, then we do it properly, by the book. There's no drama. Do you want me in the room?" I shook my head. "No, but I might need you after." The truth is that terminating someone you despise is simple. Firing someone you care about, someone who never imagined you could wield such power, is a very different experience. But before I could think of a softer option, I emailed Mason a calendar invite. One-on-one interaction is required, as is proper behavior and performance. Is greater than snorts, is greater than is greater than. 2 minutes later, he responded with only one word. Sure. Have you ever reached a point where the fear of conflict is less than the dread of remaining the same? That is where I was. Whatever transpired in that room would have long-term consequences for my family. It was also going to affect Brightline. I only had to select which future was more important. Mason walked into the small conference room 8 minutes late, as if it were any other check-in. He slumped into the chair opposite me, rotating it slightly on its axis. So, he explained, stretching the word out. Am I here for another lecture on tone, or did someone protest that my coffee orders had become too aggressive? I softly closed the door and sat down. Sit up, Mason, I instructed. This isn't a joke. He smirked, then straightened slightly. You really leaned into the dramatic boss energy in there, according to him. I'm recording people and everything. I had no idea you had it in you. I responded, there are certain things you don't know about me. He scoffed. That's part of the problem. Come on, Avenue. I have known you my entire life. I know you. You're not going to ruin my career because a couple of interns don't like my sense of humor. I slid the printed complaint across the table to him, followed by a stack of screenshots. This isn't about a couple of interns. I explained quietly. It's about a pattern. You have undermined junior employees, made discriminatory remarks, misrepresented expenses, and cost us a major client. When people tried to speak with you about it, you mocked them. And then you mocked me in front of those same people. He took a quick glance at the papers. They are overreacting. Everyone is so soft now. And you are making this personal because of one stupid toast. It is personal, I replied. It's personal for everyone you humiliated. It is personal to every employee who witnessed you getting away with it, and wondered if this place was safe for them. And, yes, it is personal to me because you did it on my watch. In my company. He laughed, clearly amused. What is your company? He repeated. That is cute. You do some scheduling, boss people around on deadlines, and then it's your company. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been anticipating for years. Mason. Brightline is more than just where I work. It's mine. I held his gaze. I founded it. I own it. Grant is the public CEO because that is how we structured it. But the controlling interest belongs to me, the anonymous majority owner everyone talks about. I tapped my chest. That's me. For the first time, he became completely still. The smirk vanished from his face as if someone had turned a switch. You're lying, he said, but not with much conviction. Ask HR, I responded. Ask legal. Ask our accountant. Ask our accountant. Or, better yet, consider every time you've heard someone mention our investor or silent partner, and how strange it is that I attend every leadership meeting for someone who is supposedly only a project manager. I led you to believe I was drifting because it was easier than dealing with your jealousy or our parents' criticism. That is on me. But your behavior here is entirely your responsibility. A flush rose up his neck. So what? He said with a tight voice. You've been letting me work under you like some kind of experiment. Enjoying the show from your little throne. He said with a tight voice. I hired you because Grant believed in your potential. I told you. I approved the hire because I wanted to believe you had matured. I remained anonymous because I wanted to see who you'd be when you thought no one in the room needed you more than you needed them. His eyes widened. And you decided I failed your little test. You decided that, I said softly, every time you chose to shrink someone so that you could feel bigger, every snort time you exchanged respect for a cheap laugh. Every time you promised to be the most powerful person in the room by convincing yourself that everyone else was replaceable. He leaned forward. His features tense. Do you think you're better than me now? Is this it? Because you have some documents with your name on them. When you were messing around in that co-working space, your parents mortgaged half of their future to help you pursue your dream. I'm the one who stayed at home. Every week, I pay them a visit. Do not talk to me about who is selfish. There it was. He had been holding a family grenade. They did not tell you that part, I said quietly. They offered to help. I said no. I took out loans. I wish I had not maxed my cards. They only gave me doubt. They mistook doubt for love. Are you certain this is realistic? Perhaps you should get something stable first. I built this place despite that, not as part of a secret bailout. He stared at me, looking for a crack. Even if this is true, you are still my sister. He asked, are you really going to fire me? Make me the villain in your small business story. What will you tell Mom? That you annihilated your own brother because a couple of snowflakes couldn't handle a joke. I remembered Claire's voice in my office. The anonymous email writers stated that today had given them hope. Of the clients who trusted us to represent their brands without using their teams as targets. If I don't fire you, I explained slowly. What I'm really telling Mom is that she was correct about me all along. I'm too soft to lead. What I'm saying to everyone here is that their safety is optional when the person who is hurting them is someone I love. His eyes narrowed. You are serious? Mason, I said, my voice breaking slightly around the edges. I love you. I will always want the best for you, but I will not allow you to destroy what I have built simply because no one has ever told you no and meant it. For once in our lives, the consequences will match the choices, not the story you've told people about yourself. He swallowed and looked away. So, that's it? He asked. You're going to take everything away from me in front of my friends, humiliate me, and set an example. I recalled the lounge, the toast, and the laughter that had swept over me like a wave. He appeared to be certain that I would never fight back because I had never done so. I won't humiliate you, I said. I'm going to tell the truth. What people do with that truth is entirely up to them. I then slid the termination documents across the table. Your employment with Brightline is ending immediately. HR will guide you through the logistics. Equipment return, benefits, everything. You will be paid out in accordance with your contract. You are not being publicly dragged. You are being held accountable. He looked at the papers and then at me. Hurt glared with rage in his eyes. He whispered. You are choosing them over me. I replied, I'm choosing me. And the version of me who promised this place would never be the kind of place that broke her. If you ever decide to do the work, to learn, to apologize, or to change, I will be your sister on the other side, but I will no longer be your shield. He didn't sign the papers right away. He stood up, knocked the chair back, and left the room without saying anything else. HR would catch up to him. The legal process would proceed whether he dragged his feet or not. What mattered now was not his signature. It was the final line I had drawn. Here's something that rarely comes up in revenge stories. Sometimes the real vengeance isn't a dramatic takedown. It's the quiet moment when you refuse to continue sacrificing yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. Still, there was one more thing I needed to do. Not just for me, but for everyone who had seen that lounge scene and assumed their boss thought of them in the same way my brother did. I needed to tell them who I truly was and what that meant for their future. In business, word spreads quickly, but nothing spreads faster than a sentence. Have you heard? Mason has been fired. By the next morning, the rumor had evolved from a cautious whisper to an accepted fact. Some people seemed relieved. Others appeared nervous, waiting for the catch. We'd all witnessed flashy crackdowns in other places that turned out to be staged. I did not want this to be one of those. So I did something I had avoided for years. I displayed my real name where everyone could see it. A new all-hands invitation went out. Company updates include ownership and culture. Grant attached a brief note. You will want to be present for this. When the team gathered, the mood was different from the previous meeting. Less defensiveness and more genuine curiosity. A couple of people looked toward the back, expecting Mason to arrive late with a story about everything being overblown. His seat remained empty. Grant opened again, but this time he made it brief. You all know me, he said. You understand what I do here. What you may not realize is who I do it with. Today, we're drawing back the curtain. No more anonymous ownership. No more guesses. He turned to face me. Avery. I walked to the front, my heart pounding and palms damp. On the screen behind me, a new slide was waiting. Our logo appears at the top, with a simple line underneath. Avery Bennett, the founder and majority owner. Next to it was a photograph of myself that I despised seeing, taken on the day we signed the lease for our office. I looked younger, tired, but hopeful. There was a beat of silence. Then the entire room inhaled. Some people actually said, "Wait. What?" out loud. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Someone in the back whispered, "I knew it. I should have told you this long ago." I began when we launched Brightline. I chose to stay in the background for a variety of reasons. Some are strategic, while others are more personal. I was afraid that if my family found out what I was building, they would try to control it, compare it, or tear it down. I was afraid that if any of you knew, you'd judge me differently, treat me differently, and stop being honest with me. So I let the concept of a mysterious owner exist, and I let you believe I was just another cog in the machine. That secrecy protected me in some ways, but it also cost us because it made it difficult for you to believe that leadership would step up when it was needed. I took a breath. Yesterday was one of those occasions. You saw someone in this room wield power and use it to harm others. Some of you were hurt. Some of you laughed along. Some of you remained silent because you were unsure who would choose you over him. I need you to know this. I saw it. I overheard it. And I won't pretend that's who we are. I took a half-second glance at Mason's empty seat. Mason Bennett left Brightline yesterday. That decision was difficult on a personal level. He's my brother. A ripple spread throughout the room. They now had a clear picture of the situation. The family toast, the bitterness, the layers. However, simply being related to me does not provide immunity in this situation. If anything, it raises the standard. If I can hold my own family accountable, you won't have to worry about me making excuses for others. I noticed the faces in front of me soften. Some people were shocked. Some appeared to want to clap but weren't sure if it was appropriate yet. "Now," I said, "we should talk about that lounge and what it meant when people laughed." I looked up a still image from security footage. No audio, just a frame of people eating toast, their faces blurred for privacy, but the context was clear. Mason stands in the center, arm raised, and the others around him are amused in various ways. The night my brother called, I was still unemployed. Almost everyone in the frame laughed. Some of you are currently in this room. I'm not here to roast or embarrass you. I'm here to be honest. You weren't just laughing at me. You were laughing at the version of me that he had sold you. Useless, drifting, and disposable. You were laughing at the notion that someone without a visible title doesn't matter. I let that sit for a moment. Here's an unexpected twist. Every individual in that frame worked for me. You were celebrating the failure of the person who signed your paychecks. And I don't say that to brag, but to make a point. When you decide that someone is beneath you, you have no idea who you're mocking. You don't understand their story, their power, or their worth. A few people were in tears now. One of the strategy leaders raised their hand. I was there. He explained. I laughed. I should not have. I apologize. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. Owning it is the first step. This is not about mass punishment. It's about resetting. Nonetheless, there are consequences to what we tolerate. So, here's what will happen. I advance to the next slide. 4 bullet points. First, we are implementing clear anti-harassment and anti-bullying policies with real teeth, rather than just HR posters, training, reporting channels, and follow-through. Second, anyone who has directly encouraged or participated in abusive behavior as documented in complaints and messages will meet with HR within the next week to discuss performance and fit. Some of these conversations will result in improvement plans. A few will result in separation. I'm not going to name those people here, but they know who they are and what they wrote. I hesitated before the third point, but decided to proceed. Third, and most importantly, if you laughed that night and genuinely want to improve, I will not fire you for a single moment of poor judgment. I'm inviting you to demonstrate that you can be a part of the culture we're creating rather than the one we recently shut down. You might be thinking, but what about the title? Didn't you fire everyone for laughing? The truth is that I fired everyone who insisted on being the person who laughed. A few people chose that path. In their HR meetings, they rolled their eyes, dismissed everything as overblown, and stated unequivocally that they would not change. Their contracts ended, and their badges were deactivated. They received the same corporate exit treatment as Mason, minus the sibling complication. But others cried. They apologized directly to the colleagues they had hurt. They offered to help rewrite our culture handbook. They asked openly, "What can I do to fix this?" These were the ones I kept. Not because they were perfect, but because they were eager. I'm not interested in running a company full of flawless people, I said to the audience. I want to run a company full of people who are motivated to succeed. If you're here for that, I'm with you. If you aren't, this is probably not the place for you, which is fine. But I refuse to allow Brightline to become a playground for egos at the expense of everyone else. Following the meeting, something changed. The gossip did not stop overnight, but the tone shifted. People began calling each other in rather than just out. Jokes became sharper but kinder, addressing situations rather than people's identities or insecurities. New hires were told the story of the owner firing her own brother, not as a juicy piece of drama, but as a reminder that she truly means what she says about respect. My family was messier. My mother called me in tears and accused me of ruining your brother's life. I calmly informed her that Mason's choices had accomplished that. My dad was quieter, but one night he called and said, I had no idea how big Brightline was. I'm proud of you. It wasn't a complete apology for years of dismissive behavior. But it was a step in the right direction. I took it. Mason did not speak to me for weeks. He finally sent a short text. I got a job interview. I will figure it out. Do not worry about me. It was not forgiveness. It wasn't understanding, but it was a step toward becoming a self-sufficient version of himself. People ask if I regret it. Firing my brother, revealing myself, and shattering the illusion that kept everyone happy. The answer is no. He believed he had complete control when he raised his glass and called me still unemployed. The true vengeance did not involve firing him. It was showing him and everyone else that the person you least expect may be the one writing the ending. If you've ever been the less successful sibling, the quiet one at the table, the one everyone mocks because they believe you'll never speak up, I'd like to ask you something. What would happen in your life if you stopped waiting for permission to take up space? And if you've ever seen someone get trampled at work and said nothing, here's a reality check. Are you going to stand up or laugh the next time? Because in the end, that is the true twist in any revenge story. It is not only about the person who eventually fights back. When the tables are turned, everyone else has to decide which side they're on.